A woman rejected for her disability arrives at the frontier seeking one last chance, but the town of Red Hollow sees only what she lacks, not who she is. When the man who promised her a future turns her away at first sight, Elara Quinn faces a brutal choice: surrender to a world that measures worth by perfection, or fight to prove that strength comes in forms no one expects. In a land where survival demands everything, one question will change two broken lives forever. Who are you, beyond what others see? Follow this story to the end, hit like, and comment your city so I can see how far this journey travels. The stagecoach lurched to a stop, sending up a cloud of dust that hung in the still air like a verdict waiting to be read. Elara Quinn gripped the wooden seat beneath her, feeling the familiar ache in her left leg, the one that hadn't worked right since she was 7, since the fever that took her mother and left her with a limp that announced her presence before she ever spoke a word. Red Hollow didn't look like much. A single street of weathered buildings, false-fronted and sun-bleached, stretched between empty lots of scrub grass and red clay. The mountains beyond rose dark and indifferent, their peaks lost in afternoon haze. This was the edge of everything, the kind of place people came when they'd run out of options everywhere else. She gathered her belongings, one carpet bag, one small trunk, and a leather satchel containing 3 letters from Mr. Thomas Whitmore, each one more persuasive than the last. A partnership, he'd written. A fresh start for both of us. I'm not looking for perfection, Miss Quinn. I'm looking for someone genuine. The driver helped her down, his hands businesslike and brief. She didn't miss the way his eyes skipped over her, cataloging and dismissing in the same glance. 28 years had taught her to recognize that look. Whitmore Place? He asked, setting her trunk in the dirt. Yes, he's expecting me. The driver pointed toward a building with a painted sign. Whitmore Mercantile. Right there, good luck to you, ma'am. The way he said it made her stomach tighten, like she'd need it. Elara straightened her traveling dress, navy blue, practical, the best she owned, and made her way across the street. Her gait was uneven but steady, the rhythm as familiar to her as breathing. Left foot, drag, right foot. Left foot, drag, right foot. She'd learned long ago not to rush it, not to pretend. Pretending only made the fall harder. The mercantile door stood open. Inside she could see shelves lined with dry goods, bolts of fabric, tools hanging from hooks. A man stood behind the counter, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a mustache that gave him an air of respectability. He was speaking to a customer, laughing at something, his voice warm and easy. Thomas Whitmore. It had to be. Elara stepped inside. The floorboards creaked beneath her weight, and both men turned. The laughter died. Whitmore's smile froze, then faded entirely. His eyes traveled down, taking in her uneven stance, the way she favored her right side, the careful way she held herself upright. Something shifted in his expression. Not cruelty exactly, but something worse. Disappointment. Can I help you? His voice had gone flat. Mr. Whitmore? She kept her chin level. I'm Elara Quinn. I believe you're expecting me. The silence that followed felt like falling. The customer, an older man with a graying beard, glanced between them and muttered something about coming back later. He left quickly, the door swinging shut behind him. Whitmore came around the counter slowly. Up close, he was exactly as he'd described himself in his letters. Handsome in a conventional way, well-dressed, the kind of man who'd never had to wonder if he was enough. He stopped a few feet away, maintaining distance like she might be contagious. Miss Quinn. He said her name like he was testing the weight of a mistake. I wasn't expecting... Expecting what? She knew, but she wanted to hear him say it. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. In your letters, you never mentioned... My limp? She said it plainly, without apology. You never asked. That's not... He stopped, started again. I was under the impression that you were... That is, I thought... You thought what, Mr. Whitmore? That a woman of 28, unmarried, willing to travel alone to marry a stranger, would be without some reason for her circumstances. His jaw tightened. I run a business. I need a partner who can manage things, who can... I can read, Elara said, her voice steady despite the sick feeling spreading through her chest. I can write. I can keep accounts. I can manage inventory, negotiate with suppliers, handle customers. Everything you described in your letters needing help with, I can do. It's not just about that. He looked away, unable to meet her eyes. People talk. This town, it's small. Appearances matter. I need someone who presents well. There it was. The truth beneath all the polite evasions. I see. Alara felt something hardening inside her, the same protective shell she'd built up over years of moments exactly like this. Then I suppose we have nothing further to discuss. I'll pay for your return passage, Whitmore said quickly, reaching for his wallet. It's only fair. This is my mistake, not yours. Keep your money. The words came out sharper than she intended. I'll manage. Miss Quinn, please, let me at least... I said no. She turned and walked out, each step deliberate, refusing to hurry, refusing to let him see how his rejection landed. The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt like a door closing on everything she'd hoped for. Outside, the street was empty. The sun had shifted, throwing long shadows across the dirt. The stagecoach was gone. Alara stood there, her trunk and carpetbag at her feet, and felt the full weight of her situation settle onto her shoulders. She'd spent nearly everything she had on the journey here. 3 weeks of travel, paying for passage, for meals, for the small room she'd rented her last night in Carson City while she gathered her courage. She had maybe $20 left. Not enough to get back. Not enough to start over somewhere else. She was stranded. A woman emerged from the building next door, a boarding house, judging by the sign. She was perhaps 50, with graying hair pulled back severely and a face that suggested she'd spent her life making hard assessments. She studied Alara with frank curiosity. You the mail-order bride? She asked. The term stung, even though it was accurate enough. I was. Didn't work out? No. The woman nodded, unsurprised. Whitmore's particular had 2 others come through last year. Neither one stuck. She paused. You need a room? Alara calculated quickly. A week's lodging, maybe 2 if she stretched it. Then what? Yes. Thank you. $2 a week. Meals are extra. I'm Mrs. Hadley. Alara Quinn. Mrs. Hadley helped her with the trunk. Didn't comment on Ilara's uneven gait. Didn't offer excessive help or excessive pity. Just picked up one end and waited for Alara to manage the other. The room was small and plain. A narrow bed, a washstand, a single window overlooking the street. It smelled of lye soap and loneliness. Supper's at 6, Mrs. Hadley said, and left her alone. Alara sat on the bed and allowed herself exactly 3 minutes to feel the full force of what had just happened. The humiliation, the fear, the bitter familiarity of it all. She'd been here before. Maybe not in this exact room, in this exact town, but in this exact situation. Hoping that this time would be different, that someone would see past the surface to what lay beneath. She'd been a fool. When the 3 minutes were up, she stood, unpacked her few belongings, and began planning her next move. Over the next week, Alara learned the geography of Red Hollow. 3 saloons, 2 churches, 1 hotel, 1 bank, 1 newspaper office, Whitmore's Mercantile, a blacksmith, a livery stable, a doctor's office that doubled as a barber shop, and maybe 200 people who all seemed to know each other's business before it happened. She also learned that opportunities for women were limited to cooking, cleaning, sewing, or teaching, and the town already had a school teacher, a seamstress, and more than enough women willing to take in laundry. She tried anyway. The owner of the hotel, a Mr. Frost, interviewed her for a housekeeping position. He was polite, asked reasonable questions, seemed genuinely interested, until she stood to leave and he saw her walk. His expression shuddered immediately. I'll let you know, he said, which they both knew meant no. The newspaper editor, a Mr. Pierce, needed someone to help with typesetting. Alara knew the work. She'd helped at a print shop in St. Louis for 2 years. But when she demonstrated her uneven stance made it difficult to stand for the long hours required, he thanked her and said he'd keep her in mind. The seamstress, Miss Cartwright, was more direct. I need someone who can work quickly, dear. I can't have clients waiting while you move between the cutting table and the sewing machine. I'm sure you understand. She understood perfectly. By the end of the second week, Alara's funds had dwindled to $8. Mrs. Hadley, showing more kindness than she'd expected, had reduced her rent in exchange for help with cleaning, but it wasn't enough. Alara lay awake at night doing calculations that never came out right, watching the shadows move across the ceiling and wondering if this was how her story ended, stranded in a frontier town that had no use for her. On Sunday, she attended church, not because she felt particularly faithful, but because it seemed like the kind of place where opportunities might emerge. The service was held in a simple wooden building, the pews filled with families dressed in their best. Elara sat in the back, alone, and tried not to notice the way people glanced at her, then looked away. The minister, Reverend Talbot, was a thin man with fervent eyes who preached about perseverance through trials. Elara found the irony almost funny. After the service, women clustered in small groups outside, their conversations rising and falling like birds settling. Elara approached one group, 3 women near her own age, their dresses neat, their faces bright with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly where you belonged.
"Excuse me," Elara said. "I'm new to Red Hollow. I'm looking for work, and I wondered if any of you might know of opportunities."
The tallest woman, a brunette with sharp features, looked her over. "What kind of work?" "Anything, really. I can keep books, write correspondence, manage a household, teach." "Can you ride?" Another woman interrupted. No, not well." "Can you work a full day without tiring?" The question landed like an accusation. Elara felt heat rising in her face. "I'm quite capable of—" "It's just that we saw you walking," the third woman said, not unkindly. "This is hard country. People need to pull their weight. I assure you I can—" "I'm sure you mean well," the brunette said, her tone dismissive. "But honestly, Miss Quinn, you'd be better served finding someplace more accommodating. Red Hollow isn't a charity town." They moved away, their conversation resuming as if she'd never existed. Elara stood there, the sunlight beating down, feeling exposed and raw. Around her, families loaded into wagons, men shook hands, children chased each other through the dust. Life continued, indifferent to her struggle. She was about to leave when a man approached, older, perhaps 60, with a weathered face and kind eyes. He introduced himself as Mr. Dalton, owner of the general store across from Whitmore's Mercantile. "I couldn't help overhearing," he said quietly. "Those women don't speak for everyone." "They speak for enough people." He acknowledged that with a slight nod. "I don't have work for you, Miss Quinn. I wish I did, but I know someone who might. A man named Caleb Mercer. Runs a ranch about 6 miles north. He's been looking for help, someone to manage his household, keep his records. He's not, well, he's particular in his own way, but he's fair, pays decent." Elara's heart jumped despite herself. "Why hasn't he hired anyone?" Dalton hesitated. "Mercer keeps to himself. Had some trouble a few years back, lost his wife and son, took it hard. Some folks find him difficult. He doesn't suffer fools, and he's got no patience for gossip or small talk." "I have very little patience for either of those things myself." A smile flickered across Dalton's face. "Then maybe you'll suit. I can't promise anything, but I'll send word that you're interested. If he agrees, he'll send someone to fetch you. Fair enough?" "More than fair, thank you, Mr. Dalton." "Don't thank me yet. Mercer might say no, and if he says yes, don't expect it to be easy." "I stopped expecting easy a long time ago." 3 days passed with no word. Elara spent them helping Mrs. Hadley and trying not to count the remaining dollars in her purse. She'd begun to think Dalton's offer had been nothing more than kindness, a way to let her down gently, when a man appeared at the boarding house asking for her. He was young, maybe 20, with sun-darkened skin and cautious eyes. "Miss Quinn, I'm Jamie. Mr. Mercer sent me to bring you out to the ranch, if you're still interested." "I am. Can you be ready in an hour?" "I can be ready in 10 minutes." Jamie nodded, then hesitated. "Mr. Mercer, he's not what you'd call warm. Wanted me to make that clear. This is work, not charity. He expects competence, and he doesn't tolerate excuses. If that doesn't suit you, better to say so now." Elara met his eyes. "Does he expect me to work harder than I'm able?" "No, ma'am. He expects you to work as hard as you're able." "That's different." "Then it suits me fine." The ride north took them through rolling grassland, broken by rocky outcroppings and scattered stands of cottonwood. Jamie didn't talk much, but he wasn't unfriendly. He handled the wagon with easy competence, navigating ruts and rocks without apparent effort. "How long have you worked for Mr. Mercer?" Elara asked. 3 years. Since I was 17. "What's he like?" Jamie considered the question. "Honest. Doesn't lie. Doesn't expect you to lie to him. Works harder than anyone I've ever seen. Treats his animals well. Pays on time." He paused. "He's not cruel, Miss Quinn, if that's what you're worried about. Just closed off. Since his family died, he doesn't let people close." "I'm not looking for close," Alara said. "I'm looking for work." "Then you'll probably get along fine." The ranch appeared gradually. First fences, well-maintained, then pastures where cattle grazed, then a cluster of buildings arranged around a central yard. The main house was modest, single-story, built of weathered wood with a wide porch. Nearby stood a barn, a bunkhouse, a smokehouse, and various outbuildings in good repair. Everything about the place spoke of careful attention. No loose boards, no sagging gates, no accumulation of the small negligences that marked a property in decline. Someone here cared about the details. Jamie pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. "Wait here. I'll let him know you've arrived." He disappeared inside. Alara climbed down carefully, testing her weight before committing to each step. Her leg ached from the journey. It always did after prolonged sitting, but she'd learned to work through worse. The door opened. Caleb Mercer was not what she expected. He was perhaps 35, tall and lean in the way of men who worked physically every day. His hair was dark, touched with early gray at the temples, and his face was hard-angled and sun-weathered. But it was his eyes that caught her, gray eyes that seemed to look straight through surface appearances to something deeper. He also moved with a slight hitch in his right leg. Not pronounced, but there. He came down the porch steps and stopped a few feet away, studying her with the same directness she'd just used on him. "Miss Quinn." "Mr. Mercer. Jamie says you're interested in the position." "I am." "Dalton tells me you're competent with books and correspondence. That true?" "Yes." "Can you cook?" "Adequately. I won't poison you, but don't expect anything fancy." Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. "Can you clean?" "Yes." "Can you work without supervision?" "I prefer it." He nodded slowly. "The work is this. Manage the household, keep the books, handle correspondence with buyers and suppliers, maintain the inventory records. I run about 200 head of cattle, plus horses. We're 6 miles from town, so you'll need to be comfortable with isolation. I don't entertain. I don't gossip. I expect you here to work, not to socialize. In return, you'll have your own room, 3 meals a day, and $30 a month. That acceptable?" It was more than acceptable. It was better than anything she'd hoped for. "Yes. You understand this is employment, nothing else. I'm not looking for companionship or charity cases or someone to manage my personal life. You do your work, I do mine. We'll get along fine as long as those boundaries are clear." "Perfectly clear. Then there's one more thing." He paused, and for the first time something uncertain crossed his face. "People in town talk about me. They'll tell you I'm difficult, that I'm bitter, that I ran off my last housekeeper because I'm impossible to please. Some of that's true. I don't suffer fools and I don't pretend things are fine when they're not. If that's going to be a problem for you, say so now." Alara looked at him, really looked. She saw the careful distance he maintained, the walls he'd built, the way he held himself apart from the possibility of connection. She recognized all of it because she'd built the same walls herself. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "I came to Red Hollow because a man promised me a partnership and then rejected me the moment he saw I wasn't perfect. I've spent the last 2 weeks being turned away from every opportunity because people see my limp before they see my ability. I'm not here because I have options. I'm here because I don't. But I'm also not here to be pitied or to pity you. You need someone who can do the work. I can do it. If that's enough for you, it's more than enough for me." The silence stretched between them. Then Caleb Mercer did something unexpected. He smiled. It wasn't much, just a slight upward curve at the corner of his mouth, but it transformed his face, revealing the man he might have been before grief hardened him. "That'll do," he said. "Welcome to the ranch, Miss Quinn." He turned and headed back toward the house, his gait uneven but steady, not bothering to see if she followed. Alara picked up her carpet bag and followed him inside. The interior of the house was clean but sparse, functional furniture, no decoration beyond a few photographs on the mantel. A main room with a fireplace, a kitchen area, 2 doorways leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. Caleb pointed to the door on the left. "That's yours. There's a bed, a dresser, a washstand. Anything else you need, let me know. Kitchen's stocked. Make yourself familiar with it. I eat at 6 in the morning and 6 at night. Don't care much what you cook as long as it's edible. Understood. The ledgers are in that desk. He nodded toward a battered oak desk in the corner. I've let them get behind. That's your first priority. After that, there's correspondence that needs answering. I'll show you the inventory system tomorrow. All right. He started to leave, then stopped. Miss Quinn? Yes? I don't care about your limp. I care whether you can do the job. Those are different things. Don't confuse them. Before she could respond, he walked out, the door closing quietly behind him. Alara stood alone in the house that was now, somehow, hers too. She walked to the bedroom, small, like the one at Mrs. Hadley's, but cleaner, brighter, with a window that looked out over the pastures toward the mountains. Her room, her job, her chance. She sat on the bed and felt, for the first time in weeks, something that wasn't fear or desperation. She felt possibility. The first week was work, just work. Alara rose at 5, made coffee, started breakfast. Caleb ate quickly and without conversation, then disappeared to handle the ranch. She spent her days wrestling with ledgers that hadn't been properly maintained in months, deciphering Caleb's terse handwriting, organizing receipts and correspondence into some semblance of order. The numbers told a story. Caleb was good at ranching but terrible at administration. He'd been underpaid on at least 3 cattle sales, had let several invoices go uncollected, and was sitting on inventory he could have sold for profit months ago. Nothing catastrophic, but enough small inefficiencies that they added up to real money. She made notes, drew up new systems, created organized files. Caleb barely acknowledged the changes. He'd come in for meals, eat, and leave. Sometimes he'd ask a brief question about a transaction or a buyer. She'd answer. He'd nod and go. It should have been lonely. Instead, it was almost restful. No one here expected her to be anything other than competent. No one watched her walk with that mix of pity and discomfort she'd grown to hate. Caleb treated her exactly as he'd promised, as an employee whose value was measured by her work, not her limitations. On the 8th day, she was working at the desk when Caleb came in mid-afternoon, which was unusual. He was covered in dirt, favoring his right leg more than usual. "Need you to ride into town tomorrow," he said without preamble. "Pick up supplies. List is on the counter." Alara looked up. "I don't ride well." "Can you handle a wagon?" "Yes." "Then take the wagon. Jamie will hitch it up for you." "All right." He started to leave, then turned back. "You reorganized the ledgers." "It wasn't a question." "Yes." "Your system was inefficient." "It worked." "It worked poorly. You were losing money." He considered this. "How much?" "Approximately $300 over the past 6 months, mostly in uncollected debts and underpriced sales." His eyebrows rose slightly. "That's more than I thought." "You're good at running cattle, Mr. Mercer. You're terrible at running a business. That's why you hired me." For a moment, she thought she'd overstepped. Then he nodded. "Fair enough. What's your plan to fix it?" She outlined the new system she'd implemented: organized filing, regular billing cycles, market research on cattle prices, a tracking system for inventory. He listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he said, "Do it, whatever you think is necessary." "You're not going to question any of it?" "You know numbers. I don't. Why would I question you?" It was such a simple statement, but it hit her with unexpected force. Trust. He was trusting her judgment. "I'll need authority to negotiate with buyers," she said, testing the boundaries. "You have it. And to refuse sales if the price isn't right? Use your judgment." Alara felt something shift inside her, a loosening of tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. "Thank you." He shrugged. "You're doing the work. Might as well do it right." He headed for the door, then paused. "Miss Quinn?" "Yes?" "You were right about Whitmore. He's a fool." Before she could respond, he was gone. Alara stood at the desk long after he'd left, staring at the ledgers she'd reorganized, feeling the weight of that simple statement settle into her bones. You were right about Whitmore. He's a fool. 6 words that acknowledged what no one else had been willing to say, that the rejection hadn't been about her worth, but about his blindness. She returned to work, but something had shifted. The numbers seemed less like a puzzle to solve and more like a foundation she was building, one careful calculation at a time. The next morning, she drove the wagon into Red Hollow. The journey took 90 minutes, her hands steady on the reins as the horses plodded along the rutted road. She'd always been better with animals than people. They didn't care how you walked, only how you treated them. The town looked different now that she wasn't desperate. The buildings were still weathered, the street still dusty, but she wasn't seeing it through the lens of rejection anymore. She had a purpose here, a job, a place, however tenuous, that didn't depend on someone else's judgment of her appearance. She pulled up in front of Dalton's store. The older man emerged, a smile creasing his weathered face when he saw her. "Miss Quinn, heard you took the position with Mercer." "I did. Thank you for the recommendation. How's it working out?" "He's exactly as you described. Fair and particular. It suits me." Dalton nodded, satisfied. "He's a good man. Just carries a lot of weight." He glanced at the list she handed him. "I'll get this together for you. Take about 20 minutes." While Dalton gathered supplies, Alara walked across the street to the mercantile. She needed fabric. Her work dresses were wearing thin, and she'd need something sturdier for ranch life. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. Thomas Whitmore stood behind the counter, helping a woman select ribbon. When he saw Alara, his expression went carefully blank. "Miss Quinn." "Mr. Whitmore." She kept her voice neutral, professional. "I need 10 yards of sturdy cotton, dark blue or brown." He finished with his customer, then pulled out several bolts of fabric without meeting her eyes. "This one's practical, wears well." "That'll do?" As he measured and cut, the silence between them grew uncomfortable. Finally, he said, "I heard you're working for Caleb Mercer." "I am." "That's good. He's been needing help." Alara took the wrapped fabric, counted out her money. "Yes, he has. Turns out being particular about who you hire means sometimes you end up with no one at all." Whitmore flushed. "Miss Quinn, The fabric's fine, Mr. Whitmore, thank you." She left before he could finish whatever apology or justification he'd been preparing. She didn't need either. What she needed was to stop giving men like him the power to make her feel small. Back at Dalton's, she found the supplies loaded and a familiar face waiting. Jamie, leaning against the wagon with easy patience. "Mr. Mercer asked me to ride in. Make sure you didn't have trouble," he said. "I'm perfectly capable of managing a supply run." "I know, told him that. He said to come anyway." Jamie shrugged. "He doesn't send people to check on folks he doesn't trust. Means he's thinking ahead, making sure things run smooth." Alara considered that. "Is that his way of showing concern?" "Pretty much. He's not much for words." They rode back together, Jamie on horseback alongside the wagon. He was easy company, talking when the silence stretched too long but comfortable with quiet when it didn't. "You settling in all right?" he asked as they passed the halfway point. "Better than I expected." Ranch life takes some folks by surprise, the isolation especially. "I prefer it to crowds." Jamie nodded. "Me too. My pa was a drunk, mean when he drank, which was most days. Left home at 15, worked my way west doing whatever I could find. When I got to Red Hollow, I was sleeping in the livery stable, stealing food when I had to. Mr. Mercer caught me trying to take bread from his saddlebag." Alara glanced at him. "What did he do?" "Asked if I was hungry. When I said yes, he told me to take the whole loaf, but next time I should just ask instead of steal. Then he offered me work. Said if I was willing to learn, he'd teach me ranching. Been here ever since." Jamie paused. "What I'm saying is, he sees people different than most. Doesn't care much about where you came from or what's wrong with you. Just cares if you're honest and willing to work." "That's rare." "Yeah, it is." When they arrived back at the ranch, Caleb was in the barn working on a piece of equipment. He looked up briefly, nodded at them, and returned to his work. No questions about whether she'd managed, no commentary on Jamie's presence. Just acceptance that things had been handled. Alara unloaded the supplies, put them away according to the system she'd established, and updated the inventory ledger. The afternoon passed in familiar rhythms. Correspondence answered, invoices processed, a meal prepared. When Caleb came in for dinner, she served stew and fresh bread without fanfare. He ate in silence for a while, then said, "Got a letter today from the buyer in Carson City. He's interested in purchasing 50 head next month." "What's he offering?" Caleb named a price. Alara did the calculation in her head. "That's $4 under market value." He looked at her, fork paused halfway to his mouth. How do you know market value? I've been reading the livestock reports from the Carson City newspaper. Dalton keeps copies. Current market rate for quality beef cattle is $18 a head. This buyer's offering $14. Maybe the market changed. It changed upward. 3 weeks ago it was $17. The drought in California is driving prices up. Caleb set down his fork. So what do you suggest? Counter at 19. Settle for 18. If he won't meet 18, find another buyer. That might mean waiting. Feeding cattle costs money. Less money than selling at 14, you'd lose $200 on this sale alone. He studied her across the table, his gray eyes sharp and assessing. You're sure about this? I'm sure about the numbers. Whether you trust my judgment is your decision. A long moment passed, then Caleb nodded. Write the response. Tell him 18, or we'll look elsewhere. All right. And Alara? It was the first time he'd used her given name. She looked up, surprised. Thank you, he said simply. That night, lying in her narrow bed with moonlight streaming through the window, Alara thought about trust. How it was built in small moments, not grand gestures. How Caleb had given her authority over his business decisions without hesitation, without questioning her capabilities. How different that felt from every other interaction she'd had in Red Hollow. The buyer in Carson City agreed to $18 a head. Over the following weeks, a routine established itself. Alara managed the household and business with increasing confidence. She instituted a new filing system, negotiated better prices with suppliers, and identified 3 buyers who'd been systematically underpaying for years. When she presented Caleb with a revised buyer list, he approved it without argument. The ranch responded to competent management. Small inefficiencies disappeared. Profits increased. Caleb worked the land with the same focused intensity he brought to everything, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to talk more. Not about anything personal, but about the ranch, about which pastures needed rotation, which cattle were ready for sale, what repairs the barn needed. He'd ask her opinion on business decisions, then actually listen to her answers. One evening in late October, after a particularly successful sale, Caleb came in earlier than usual. Alara was at the stove, making soup. Sold the yearlings today, he said. Got 22 ahead. She turned, surprised. That's excellent. What did you ask for? 20. Buyer offered 22 without negotiating. Someone's desperate for stock before winter. Seems like. He poured himself coffee, leaned against the counter. Means we cleared an extra $100 because you knew the market. Just doing my job. It's more than that? He was quiet for a moment. Before you came, I was bleeding money without realizing it. Thought I was doing fine. Turns out I was barely breaking even. Alara ladled soup into bowls. You were working too hard to see it. Sometimes you need distance to spot the problems. They ate in comfortable silence. Comfortable. That was new. The early days had been marked by careful distance, by boundaries neither of them crossed. But something had shifted. The silence between them now felt less like avoidance and more like understanding. Can I ask you something? Caleb said abruptly. All right. Why did you come out here? To Red Hollow, I mean. It's not exactly a destination. Alara set down her spoon. She'd known this question would come eventually. I was in St. Louis, working as a clerk in a law office. The pay was poor, the work was tedious, and the head clerk made it clear that women didn't belong in legal work. When Whitmore's advertisement appeared in the paper, it seemed like a chance for something better. Mail-order marriage, partnership, he called it, made it sound like a business arrangement between equals. She laughed without humor. Turned out he wanted something very different from a partner. He wanted decoration, essentially. Caleb was quiet, turning his coffee cup in his hands. I don't understand men like that, caring more about how something looks than how it works. Most people care about appearances. Most people are idiots. The bluntness startled a genuine laugh out of her. That's certainly one perspective. You disagree? I think people are more complicated than that. They're afraid, mostly. Afraid of being judged, of not measuring up, of being associated with anything that might make them look weak. She met his eyes. You're limp? Does it bother you? He didn't flinch from the question. Sometimes. It aches in cold weather. Slows me down when I'm trying to move fast. But it doesn't stop me from doing what needs doing. How did it happen? Horse fell on me 3 years ago. Broke my leg in 2 places. Healed wrong because I kept working instead of resting like the doctor told me to. He shrugged. My own fault. Do people treat you differently because of it?
Some do. Most just see the ranch, the cattle, what I've built. The ones who can't see past the limp don't matter much to me.
He paused. That how it is for you?
Alara considered the question carefully. Childhood fever. Left my left leg partially paralyzed. I've had it so long I barely remember being any other way. But yes, people see it before they see me. They make assumptions about what I can't do before they bother to find out what I can do. That why you never married?
That's part of it. Also because I refused to settle for someone who saw me as a burden they were being charitable to take on. I'd rather be alone than be someone's good deed. Caleb nodded slowly. I understand that. What about you? The question came out before she could stop it. Jamie mentioned you lost your wife and son. His expression closed immediately, walls slamming back into place. Alara thought she'd pushed too far, that he'd shut down completely. But after a long moment, he spoke. Sarah. Her name was Sarah. And our son was Michael. He was 4. His voice was flat, carefully controlled. Cholera epidemic 5 years back. Took them both within a week. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Doesn't change anything. He stood abruptly, carried his bowl to the wash basin. I should check on the horses. He left without looking back. Alara sat alone in the kitchen, hearing the echo of pain in his clipped words. She'd touched something raw, something he clearly wasn't ready to discuss. She wouldn't push again, but she understood him a little better now. The careful distance, the refusal to let anyone close. It wasn't just personality. It was protection. The next morning, Caleb was back to his usual routine. If he regretted sharing what he had, he didn't show it. They worked around each other with practiced efficiency, and Alara let the matter drop. November brought early snow. Not much, just a dusting that turned the landscape white and made the mountains stand out sharp against pale sky. Alara woke to find frost on her window and the house cold enough to see her breath. She dressed quickly, started the fire, put coffee on. When Caleb emerged from his room, he looked tired, the kind of tired that came from a sleepless night rather than hard work. Bad night? She asked, keeping her tone neutral. Cold bothers my legs sometimes. He poured coffee, wrapped both hands around the cup. I'll manage. I can prepare willow bark tea. It helps with inflammation. He looked at her, surprised. You know medicine? Basic remedies. My mother was a healer before she died. I remember some of what she taught me. Willow bark tea would be appreciated. She made it, and he drank it without complaint despite the bitter taste. When he finished, he said, Thank you. You're welcome. He hesitated, then added, About last night, what I said about Sarah and Michael, I don't usually talk about them. I know. I shouldn't have asked. No, it's... He stopped, started again. People in town still look at me like I'm broken, like I'm someone to feel sorry for. It's been 5 years and they still can't see past it. But you asked like you were just asking a question, not looking for a sad story, not trying to fix anything, just asking. I was curious about who you were, not what happened to you. That's the difference, I think. He set down his cup. Between people who see you and people who just see what's wrong with you. Alara felt something shift between them. Not dramatic, not sudden, but real. A recognition of kinship, of shared understanding. Yes, she said quietly. That's exactly the difference. The winter deepened. Work continued, but the rhythm changed. Shorter days meant more time inside, which meant more conversations. They were still brief, still focused mostly on practical matters, but increasingly Caleb would linger after meals, ask her opinion on things that had nothing to do with business. You think people can change? He asked one night, out of nowhere. They were sitting by the fire after dinner, Alara mending clothes while Caleb oiled tack. The question hung in the warm air between them. I think people can choose to do things differently, Alara said carefully. Whether that's the same as changing, I don't know. What's the difference? Changing implies becoming someone new. Doing things differently just means making better choices with who you already are.
Caleb worked the oil into the leather, his hands methodical. When Sarah died, I thought I'd died too. Felt like it anyway. Went through the motions for about 2 years, working the ranch, keeping things running, but not really living, just existing. Elara kept her hands moving on the mending, giving him space to talk. Then one day I realized I had a choice, he continued. I could keep existing like that, or I could decide that survival was worth something, that making the ranch work, building something that lasted, that mattered, even if they weren't here to see it, doesn't mean I stopped missing them, just means I chose to live anyway. That's not a small choice. No, it isn't. He looked up, met her eyes across the firelight. Is that what you did? When you came out here? Choose to live instead of just exist? The question cut deeper than he probably intended. Elara set down her mending. I think I've been existing for a long time, she admitted, moving from place to place, job to job, always looking for somewhere I might belong, always hoping the next place would be different, but it never was, because I was carrying the same expectations with me, expecting to be rejected, expecting to not be enough. And now? Now I'm here, doing work that matters, working for someone who judges me by my competence instead of my limitations. That's different enough that I'm starting to think maybe I was looking in the wrong places all along. Or maybe you just needed to find the right person to look at you the right way. The words settled between them, weighted with meaning neither of them was quite ready to examine. Caleb returned to his work. Elara returned to her mending. But something had been acknowledged, even if neither of them was willing to name it yet. December brought harder cold and occasional storms that kept them housebound for days at a time. Jamie stayed in the bunkhouse, coming to the main house only for meals. The cattle huddled in sheltered areas. The world contracted to the warm circle of the ranch buildings and the endless white beyond. Elara had never experienced isolation like this. In the city, winter meant crowds pressed together, noise, constant movement. Here, it meant silence broken only by wind and the occasional lowing of cattle. She thought it might drive her mad. Instead, she found it peaceful. She and Caleb fell into new patterns. Morning coffee together before he went out to check on the animals. Lunch at midday if the weather allowed him to return. Long evenings by the fire, working on separate tasks but sharing the same space. They talked more now, not constantly, but steadily. About books they'd read, places they'd been, ideas that interested them. Caleb, she discovered, was better educated than his rough manner suggested. He'd attended 2 years of university before his father died and he'd had to take over the ranch. He knew literature, history, even some philosophy. When he found out she could read Latin, his respect visibly increased. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. "The law office. One of the attorneys was kind to me. Let me use his library when I stayed late. I taught myself from his old textbooks." "That's impressive." "It's mostly useless. Not many opportunities to read Latin in Red Hollow." "Maybe not. But it shows you're willing to learn difficult things just because they interest you. That says something about who you are." It was a small comment, but it lodged in her chest with surprising warmth. When was the last time someone had valued her curiosity rather than dismissing it as impractical? One evening in mid-December, Caleb came in covered in snow, shaking ice from his coat. His face was tight with pain. "What happened?" Elara stood immediately. "Nothing, just the cold." But his limp was worse than usual, his movements stiff. "Sit down." "I'm fine." "Sit down, Caleb." He did, surprised by her tone. Elara knelt in front of him, unlaced his boot carefully. When she eased it off, he hissed in pain. "The leg?" she asked. "Yeah, swells up in this weather. Usually passes." She felt along his calf gently, assessing. The muscle was tight, inflamed. "You've been favoring it too much. Overcompensating." "Can't exactly stop working." "No, but you can let me help." She stood, went to the kitchen, returned with hot water and cloths. "I'm going to apply heat. It'll hurt at first, then it should ease." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I'm choosing to." She worked carefully, applying the heated cloths, massaging the tight muscle with firm but gentle pressure. Caleb sat rigid at first, clearly uncomfortable with the intimacy of it, but gradually he relaxed as the pain eased. "Better?" she asked after 20 minutes. "Much. Thank you." She stood to take the basin away, but his hand caught her wrist. Not hard, just enough to stop her. Alara. She looked down at him, at his gray eyes serious in the firelight.
Why are you doing this? He asked. Being kind to me. It's not part of your job. Maybe I'm just a kind person. You are. But that's not the whole reason. She could have deflected. Should have, probably. But the walls between them had been coming down slowly for weeks, and she was tired of pretending they weren't.
Because I know what it feels like, she said quietly, to hurt and have no one notice, to need help and be too proud to ask for it, to think that accepting kindness makes you weak. I don't think accepting kindness makes you weak. Don't you? Then why do you work yourself to exhaustion rather than ask Jamie to handle more? Why do you skip meals when you're in pain rather than say something? Why do you sleep in the barn sometimes instead of admitting you need rest? He released her wrist, looked away. How did you know about the barn? I pay attention. A long silence stretched between them. Then Caleb said, After Sarah died, people were kind. Too kind. They'd bring food, offer help, look at me with these pitying eyes like I was something broken that needed fixing. I hated it. Hated feeling like I was someone's charity project. So I pushed everyone away, did everything myself, proved I didn't need anyone. And now?
Now I'm starting to think there's a difference between needing someone because you can't survive without them, and wanting someone because life's better with them in it.
Alara's heart stuttered. Caleb, I'm not saying this right. He stood, faced her. What I mean is, you're not here out of pity. I don't help you because I think you need saving. We work well together because we're both strong enough not to need each other, which means we can choose each other instead. Does that make sense? It made perfect sense. It was exactly what she'd been feeling but hadn't known how to articulate. Yes, she said. It does. They stood there, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes, could smell wood smoke and winter on his clothes. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. For a moment she thought she might let him. Then he stepped back, breaking the spell. I should check on the stock one more time before full dark. Your leg is better, thanks to you. I won't be long. He left, and Alara stood alone by the fire, her hands still warm from the heated water, her heart beating faster than it should. Something had changed. Again. And this time they both knew it. Christmas came quietly. Alara made a special dinner, roast chicken, fresh bread, dried apple pie. Caleb brought in a small pine tree and set it in the corner without explanation. She draped it with strings of popcorn and cranberries, feeling foolish and pleased in equal measure. I haven't had a Christmas tree since I was a child, she said. Sarah used to insist on one, said it made the house feel like a home. He touched one of the branches gently. Hasn't been one here in 5 years. We can take it down if it's too difficult. No, it's time. He looked at her. Things change, people move forward. Maybe it's all right to let some good things come back. That night, after dinner, he handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. It's not much, he said gruffly, but I thought you might like it. Inside was a leather-bound journal, the kind with thick cream pages and a ribbon marker. Beautiful and practical at once. Caleb, this is... You're always making notes on scraps of paper. Figured you could use something proper. She ran her hand over the smooth leather, feeling the care behind the gift. Thank you, I love it. You're welcome. She gave him her gift, a new work coat she'd sewn from the fabric she'd bought in town, lined with wool for warmth. She'd worked on it secretly for weeks, stitching by lamplight after he'd gone to bed. He held it up, examined the careful stitching, the reinforced seams. You made this? I did. Your old coat was wearing through at the elbows. He put it on. It fit perfectly. It's the nicest thing anyone's made for me in a long time. Then I'm glad I made it. They sat by the fire, drinking the whiskey Caleb brought out for special occasions, and talked late into the night. About nothing important. About everything important. About what it meant to build a life worth living after everything had tried to convince you that you weren't worth the effort. Can I tell you something? Alara said, emboldened by whiskey and warmth and the particular intimacy of firelight. Always. When I first came here, I thought I was accepting this job because I was out of options. Because I was desperate, and you were the only one who'd hire me. That's what I thought too. But it wasn't true. Or maybe it was true at first, but it isn't anymore. I'm here because this is where I choose to be.
Because for the first time in my life, I'm somewhere that feels like it might actually be home. Caleb set down his glass. Alara, I need to tell you something too. All right. When I hired you, I told myself it was just business, that I needed help and you needed work, and that was the whole of it. I told myself I wasn't ready for anything more, that I'd never be ready for anything more. That part of my life was over. And now? He turned to face her fully. Now I think I was lying to myself, because somewhere between you reorganizing my filing system and arguing with buyers and making willow bark tea when my leg hurts, I stopped seeing you as just an employee, and I don't know what to do about that. Alara's breath caught. What do you want to do about it? I want to ask you a question, but I'm afraid of the answer. Ask anyway. He took her hand, rough palm against hers, warm and solid and real. Who are you, Alara Quinn? Beyond what anyone else sees. Beyond the limp, beyond the job, beyond all the ways the world has tried to define you. Who are you? The question landed like a door opening onto something vast and terrifying and full of possibility. No one had ever asked her that. Not once in 28 years had anyone cared enough to look past the surface to the person underneath. Tears stung her eyes before she could stop them. I don't know if I know how to answer that. Then maybe it's time to find out. She looked at him, really looked, and saw her own uncertainty reflected back. Saw someone as afraid of hope as she was, as scarred by rejection, as careful with trust, but also someone willing to ask the hard questions, willing to see. I'm someone who refused to give up, she said slowly, even when it would have been easier. I'm someone who knows the value of things because I've had to fight for every scrap of worth anyone's ever given me. I'm stubborn and proud and too smart for my own good sometimes. I care about precision and fairness and doing things right even when no one's watching. I'm lonely, but I'd rather be alone than be with someone who makes me feel small. And I'm terrified right now because I think you might be asking me to trust you with parts of myself I've never let anyone see. Caleb's thumb moved gently across her knuckles. I'm asking that, and I'm offering the same in return. Why? Because I'm tired of being alone. Because you make me laugh, which I thought I'd forgotten how to do. Because when I watch you work through a problem, I see someone who refuses to accept easy answers. Because you're brave in ways I'm not, and I think maybe together we could both be braver than we are apart. The tears spilled over. Alara didn't try to stop them. I'm broken, Caleb, in more ways than just the obvious ones. So am I. Maybe that's the point. Maybe we don't need to be fixed. Maybe we just need to be seen. She kissed him. Or he kissed her. Later, she wouldn't be able to say who moved first. It didn't matter. What mattered was the way his hand came up to cup her face, gentle and sure. The way she leaned into him, letting herself be held for the first time in longer than she could remember. The way it felt both new and inevitable, like something that had been waiting to happen since the moment she'd stepped off that stagecoach. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he said. Not as my housekeeper. As my partner. As someone I'm choosing and who's choosing me back. Alara thought about all the times she'd been asked to stay before. Asked to settle. Asked to accept less than she deserved because less was all anyone thought she was worth. This wasn't that. This was someone offering her everything he had and asking for everything she was in return. Not despite her limitations, but including them. Not as charity, but as choice. Yes, she whispered. I'll stay. They didn't talk about what had changed between them. They didn't need to. The next morning, Caleb came into the kitchen while she was making coffee, wrapped his arms around her from behind, and pressed a kiss to her temple like it was the most natural thing in the world. Alara leaned back into him, feeling the solid warmth of his chest against her shoulders, and let herself have this moment of simple affection without questioning it. Morning, he murmured against her hair. Morning. He released her, poured himself coffee, and they moved around each other with the same efficiency as always. Except now there were small touches, brief glances, the kind of quiet intimacy that spoke of partnership rather than mere cohabitation. Jamie noticed immediately when he came in for breakfast. Something's different, he said, looking between them with barely concealed amusement. Nothing's different, Caleb said, too quickly. Right, sure, Jamie grinned. Whatever you say, boss. Alara bit back a smile. There's biscuits in the oven if you want them. I always want biscuits. Jamie helped himself, then added casually, for what it's worth, I think it's good. You two. Makes sense. Caleb's ears went slightly red. Don't you have cattle to check on? Yep, going right now. Jamie grabbed another biscuit and headed for the door, whistling cheerfully. When he was gone, Alara turned to Caleb. That was subtle. I've never been good at subtle. I noticed. He caught her hand, pulled her close. Does it bother you that people will know? People will talk regardless. Might as well give them something real to talk about. They won't all be kind about it. Alara thought of Whitmore, of the women outside the church, of every person who'd ever looked at her and seen only what was lacking. Let them. I've survived unkindness before. You shouldn't have to. Maybe not. But I did. And it made me who I am. I'm not ashamed of that. She met his eyes. Are you ashamed of this? Of us? No. The word came out fierce, certain. I'm not ashamed. I'm just not used to being happy. Feels like something I might break if I'm not careful. Then we'll be careful. But we won't hide. He kissed her, slow and deliberate, and Alara felt something settle deep in her chest. This was real. This was hers. And she wasn't going to apologize for it. The winter weeks that followed were both ordinary and extraordinary. The work continued, cattle to feed, ledgers to balance, supplies to order. But now there was tenderness woven through the daily routine. Caleb would find excuses to touch her as they passed each other in the house. Alara would catch him watching her while she worked, his expression soft in ways she'd never seen before. At night, they'd sit by the fire and talk until the logs burned to embers, sharing stories from their lives before they'd found each other. Tell me about your mother, Caleb said one evening. Alara set down her mending. She was a healer. People came to her from all over our county when they were sick or injured. She knew plants, remedies, how to set bones and stitch wounds. When the fever came through, she worked herself to exhaustion trying to save people. And she caught it herself? Yes. She was caring for a family 3 houses down, all of them sick, 2 children already dead. She knew the risk, but she went anyway. Said healing wasn't something you did only when it was safe. Alara's throat tightened. She brought it home. My father got sick first, then me. We all had it at the same time. But you survived. My mother made me drink willow bark tea even when I was too weak to sit up, forced broth down my throat, kept me alive through sheer will. But she couldn't save herself, and my father was too far gone by the time the fever broke for me. I woke up one morning, and they were both dead. She paused, the old grief still sharp after all these years. The fever damaged the nerves in my leg. Took months before I could walk again at all. The limp never went away. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, She sounds like she was remarkable. She was. I've spent my whole life trying to live up to her example. Trying to be strong enough, capable enough, worthy of the sacrifice she made. You are worthy, Alara. You don't have to keep proving it. I know that in my head. But knowing it and believing it are different things. He reached across the space between their chairs, took her hand. Then I'll keep reminding you until you believe it. January brought a cold snap that froze the water trough solid and kept them all working extra hours to keep the livestock fed and watered. Alara bundled in layers and helped where she could, breaking ice, hauling feed, doing whatever didn't require speed or agility. She was slower than Jamie, less strong than Caleb, but she was steady, and she didn't quit. One afternoon, struggling to break the ice on a trough, she slipped on the frozen ground. Her bad leg buckled and she went down hard, landing on her hip with enough force to knock the breath from her lungs. Caleb was there in seconds, kneeling beside her. Are you hurt? Just my pride. She tried to stand, winced. And maybe my hip. He helped her up carefully, his hands firm under her arms. Can you walk? Yes, it's not that bad. Let's get you inside anyway. Caleb, I'm fine. The ice just... Inside, he said firmly. You can argue with me once you're sitting down with something hot to drink. She knew that tone. There was no point fighting it. She let him help her back to the house, trying to ignore the way her hip throbbed with each step. Inside, he settled her in a chair by the fire and examined her hip with careful hands. Already a bruise was forming, dark purple against her pale skin. That's going to hurt for a few days, he said. I've had worse. That's not the point. He looked up at her, his expression troubled. You could have been seriously injured. But I wasn't. This time. But what about next time? What if you fall when you're alone? What if, Caleb? She caught his face between her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. I'm always going to be at risk of falling. My leg is never going to work the way yours does. That's just reality. But I can't live my life being afraid of it. I can't stop trying to help just because there's risk involved. I know, He closed his eyes. When I saw you fall, for a second I thought you might lose someone else. Yes. Alara leaned forward, pressed her forehead to his. I understand that fear, but you can't protect me from everything, and I can't let fear stop me from living. I know that too. Doesn't make it easier. No, it doesn't. They sat like that for a long moment, holding each other in the warm circle of firelight while the wind howled outside. Then Caleb stood, pressed a kiss to her hair, and went to make tea. The bruise healed slowly, leaving her stiff and sore for over a week. Caleb was careful not to hover, but she noticed him watching more closely, positioning himself to catch her if she stumbled. It should have annoyed her. Instead, it felt like care rather than doubt, a distinction she was learning to recognize. By mid-February, the worst of winter had passed, and the first signs of spring appeared. The days grew longer, the snow began to melt, and suddenly there was work to be done preparing for calving season. It's going to be busy, Caleb warned her over breakfast. I'll be in the pastures most days and nights once the cows start dropping calves. Some of them need help, especially the first-time mothers. What can I do to help? Keep things running here. Handle any business that comes up. If I'm not back by evening, don't wait dinner. And if you see Jamie coming in fast, that usually means there's trouble. All right. He hesitated. I'll miss sleeping next to you. They'd started sharing his bed a few weeks earlier, a natural progression that neither of them had questioned. Alara had discovered that Caleb slept curled on his side, that he ran hot in the night, that he sometimes talked in his sleep. Nothing coherent, just fragments of words that spoke of old dreams and older losses. I'll miss you too, she said. But the cattle need you. The cattle need both of us. This ranch wouldn't run without you managing things. It was a simple acknowledgement, but it meant everything. He saw her as essential, not auxiliary, as a partner carrying equal weight, even if the work she did looked different from his. Calving season hit hard and fast. For 3 weeks, Caleb was gone more than he was home. He'd come in at odd hours, exhausted and covered in blood and other fluids, wolf down whatever food Alara had kept warm for him, and collapse into sleep for a few hours before heading back out. Sometimes Jamie came with him. Sometimes Caleb went alone. Alara managed the household and the business with steady efficiency. She processed orders, negotiated with buyers, maintained the ledgers, and kept everything running smoothly while Caleb focused on keeping the herd alive. It was grueling work for both of them, but there was satisfaction in it. They were building something together, even when they weren't in the same place. One night, Caleb came in later than usual. It was past midnight, and Alara had dozed off in the chair by the fire, ledgers still open on her lap. She woke to find him sitting on the floor beside her chair, his head resting against her knee. Caleb? What's wrong? Lost 2 calves tonight. Tried everything. Couldn't save them. She set the ledgers aside, slid down to sit beside him on the floor. He leaned into her, and she wrapped her arms around him, holding him while he dealt with the quiet grief of failure. It happens, he said after a while. Every season we lose some, but it never gets easier. It shouldn't get easier. That would mean you'd stopped caring. Maybe, but caring doesn't save them. No, but it means you tried. That matters. He pulled back, looked at her. Does it? If they still die? Yes. Because trying is what separates people who give up from people who keep fighting. You fought for those calves. They just didn't make it. That's tragedy, not failure. Something eased in his expression. How do you always know the right thing to say? I don't. I just say what I think is true and hope it helps. He kissed her, tasting of exhaustion and grief and something like gratitude. It helps. You help. They slept on the floor that night, too tired to make it to the bedroom, wrapped in each other's arms while the fire died to coals. By March, calving season was winding down. They'd lost 4 calves total, but saved 32, which Caleb said was better than most years. The work shifted to branding, vaccinating, and moving the herd to spring pastures. Elara had been at the ranch for 5 months now, and it felt like home in ways no place ever had before. She knew the rhythm of the days, the sounds of the night, the way the light changed with the seasons. She knew which floorboards creaked, which shutters rattled in the wind, which spot by the fire was warmest in the evening. She knew Caleb's moods, his silences, the things that made him laugh, and the things that made him withdraw. She also knew the town was talking. It was inevitable. Dalton mentioned it carefully one day when she was in for supplies. "There's been some talk," he said, not meeting her eyes, "about you and Mercer. I'm sure there has been. Some of it isn't kind. I didn't expect it to be." Dalton looked uncomfortable. "There's those who say you're taking advantage of him, that you saw a lonely man and wormed your way into his good graces." Elara felt anger flare hot in her chest, but she kept her voice level. "And what do you think, Mr. Dalton?" "I think you're exactly what that ranch needed, and I think Mercer's happier than I've seen him in 5 years. That's good enough for me." He paused. "But you should know what's being said, so you're prepared." "Thank you for the warning," she told Caleb that evening. He listened, his jaw getting tighter with each word. "Who's saying this?" he demanded when she finished. "Does it matter?" "Yes. I'll set them straight." "By doing what? Confronting them? That'll just confirm their right to gossip." She caught his hand. "Let them talk. They'll get bored eventually." "I don't like people speaking poorly of you." "Neither do I. But I've dealt with it before and I'll deal with it again. What matters is what we know to be true, not what they choose to believe." He wasn't happy about it, but he accepted her reasoning. For about a week. Then Elara made her regular trip to town for supplies and discovered exactly how ugly the talk had gotten. She was in Whitmore's Mercantile. She'd stopped avoiding it after realizing avoidance gave him power he didn't deserve, when 3 women entered. The same 3 who'd dismissed her outside the church months ago. They saw her and their conversation grew pointed, loud enough to be clearly heard. "Some people have no shame," the brunette said, preying on a grieving man. "Well, what else could she do?" another responded. "No decent man would have her otherwise." "I heard she was a mail-order bride who got rejected. Guess she found another way to secure a roof over her head." Elara's hands tightened on the bolt of fabric she was examining, but she didn't turn around. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Whitmore, to his credit, looked uncomfortable. "Ladies, perhaps—" "Oh, we're not saying anything that isn't true," the brunette interrupted. "Everyone knows what she is, a cripple who latched onto the first man desperate enough to overlook it." That word, cripple, landed like a physical blow. Elara felt 20 years of hurt and shame rise up in her throat, threatening to choke her. She turned slowly, met the brunette's eyes with a level gaze. "You're right," she said quietly. "I am what you say I am. My leg doesn't work properly. I walk with a limp. I'm slower than most people, weaker in some ways, limited in others. And yes, I was rejected when I first came to Red Hollow. All of that is true." The women looked startled that she was engaging rather than fleeing. "But you're wrong about Caleb Mercer," Elara continued. "He didn't take me in out of desperation or pity. He hired me because I could do work he needed done. And I've earned every cent he's paid me. I've increased his profits, streamlined his operations, and helped build something sustainable. Whatever else exists between us has nothing to do with my limitations or his loneliness. It has to do with mutual respect, shared values, and the choice we both made to build something together." "Choice," the brunette scoffed. "You think you had a choice? You were stranded here with no money and no prospects. You took what you could get." "You're right again. I did take what I could get, and what I got was an opportunity to prove my worth to someone willing to see it. That's more than I'd get from people like you, who measure worth by appearance rather than ability." "How dare you?" "I dare because I have nothing left to lose. You've already decided who I am. Nothing I say or do will change your minds. But I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of, and I know the difference between charity and partnership. What you think about it doesn't matter." She turned back to Whitmore. "I'll take 3 yards of this fabric. Put it on the ranch account." Her hands shook as he measured and cut, but she kept her chin up. When he handed her the package, he said quietly, "You were right to call them out. What they said was cruel." "Yes, it was. But cruelty says more about the person giving it than the person receiving it." She left the mercantile with her head high,
But once she was on the wagon heading back to the ranch, she let herself shake. Let herself feel the hurt of those words, the old wounds they'd reopened. Caleb knew something was wrong the moment she arrived home. He took one look at her face and said, "What happened?" She told him. Everything. The words the women had used, the way they'd said them, the public nature of the humiliation. When she finished, his face was dark with anger. "I'm going to town," he said, already reaching for his coat. "No." Alara caught his arm. "Please don't. They can't talk about you like that. They already did. Confronting them won't undo it. It'll just make things worse." "I don't care. They need to know." "What? That I need you to defend me? That I can't handle cruelty on my own?" She took a breath, steadied herself. "Caleb, I appreciate that you want to protect me, but I fought my own battle today. I stood up for myself. I said what needed to be said. If you go charging in now, it undermines everything I did." He struggled visibly with this, his need to act warring with her request for restraint. Finally, he said, "I hate this. I hate that you have to deal with people like that." "So do I. But I've been dealing with them my whole life. I know how to survive it." "You shouldn't have to just survive it. Maybe not. But that's the world we live in." She moved into his arms, let him hold her. "What matters is that I have somewhere to come home to where I'm valued, where I'm seen. That's what gets me through the cruelty." He held her tighter. "You're more than valued, Alara. You're essential. This ranch, my life, it all works because you're in it." "Then show me that. Here, at home. Let that be enough." It wasn't easy for him. Caleb was a man of action, and being asked to sit with anger rather than channel it into confrontation went against his nature. But he did it. For her, he did it. That night, lying in bed together, he said, "I want to marry you." Alara's breath caught. "What?" "I want to marry you. Not because of what anyone else thinks or says, not to protect your reputation or legitimize our relationship in their eyes, but because I love you and I want everyone to know that we chose each other." "Caleb, I know it's fast. I know we've only been together a few months, but I spent 5 years being alone, and I know the difference between what I had then and what I have now. I don't want to waste time being cautious when I'm already certain." Alara's heart was racing. "I love you too, but marriage scares you." "Yes, because every time I've hoped for something, it's been taken away. Every time I've trusted someone to see my worth, they've proven they only saw my limitations." "I'm not them." "I know you're not. But fear isn't rational. It's just there." He rolled onto his side, facing her in the darkness. "Then let me ask you this. If there was no fear, if nothing could hurt you and nothing could go wrong, would you want to marry me?" She thought about it honestly. Imagined a life where she was Alara Mercer, where this ranch was unquestionably hers, where she and Caleb built something permanent together. "Yes," she whispered, "I would." "Then that's enough for now. I'm not asking you to decide tonight. I'm just telling you what I want. Whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, the offer stands." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you for not pushing. I'm not in a hurry. I've already found what I was looking for." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and Alara dreamed of standing beside him in front of witnesses, claiming him publicly the way he wanted to claim her. Spring deepened into early summer. The ranch thrived under their combined management. Caleb handled the physical work with the help of Jamie and 2 seasonal hands they'd hired for the busy months. Alara managed everything else: the business, the household, the endless administrative tasks that kept a working ranch running smoothly. They'd found their rhythm, their balance. On Sundays, they'd sometimes ride out together to check on distant pastures, Alara riding carefully on the gentlest horse while Caleb rode beside her, patient with her slower pace. They'd pack lunch and spend hours talking, or sometimes just sitting in companionable silence while the cattle grazed and the mountains stood eternal on the horizon. "Tell me about when you were young," Alara said one afternoon. "Before your father died." Caleb chewed a blade of grass, thinking. "My father was hard. Not cruel, but exacting. Expected perfection and didn't tolerate excuses. My mother was softer, but she died when I was 12. After that, it was just me and him. He taught me ranching the same way he'd learned it, through work and failure and getting back up when you got knocked down." "Did you ever resent it?" "Sometimes. I wanted to finish university, maybe become a teacher or a lawyer. Something that didn't involve dawn to dusk labor and the constant worry of whether the cattle would make it through winter. He paused. But when he died, and the ranch became mine, I realized I'd been learning something valuable. Not just how to work cattle, but how to persist, how to build something that lasts. Do you think he'd be proud of what you've built? I don't know. Maybe. He was never much for praise. I think he would be, Alara said. This place is well run, profitable, sustainable. That takes skill and dedication. Caleb looked at her, something soft in his eyes. Most of the profitable part is you. We do it together. Yeah, we do. In June, a letter arrived from a large ranching operation in California. They'd heard about Caleb's herd, word had spread about the quality of his cattle, and wanted to discuss a major purchase. The offer was substantial enough to be life-changing. Alara brought the letter to Caleb while he was working in the barn. He read it twice, then looked at her. What do you think? I think it's an excellent opportunity. The price they're quoting is well above market rate, but it would mean selling off more than half the herd. We could rebuild, use the profit to expand, maybe buy better breeding stock. We could, or we could refuse and maintain current operations. Both options have merit. He folded the letter, tucked it in his pocket. This is the kind of decision we should make together. All right, what are the factors we need to consider? They spent the evening going through everything, the financial implications, the impact on ranch operations, the risk versus reward, the timeline for rebuilding if they sold. They argued good-naturedly about projections and possibilities, challenging each other's assumptions, working through the problem from every angle. Finally, near midnight, Caleb said, I think we should do it. Take the money, expand our operations, build something bigger. I agree, but on one condition. What's that? We get it in writing. Proper contract, verified terms, everything legally sound. I won't risk you getting cheated. He grinned. See, this is why I need you. I would have just shaken hands and trusted them. Which is why you're good at ranching and I'm good at business. They drafted a response together, outlining their terms and requirements. Alara insisted on clauses protecting them against non-payment and ensuring the cattle would be transported at the buyer's expense. When they finally sealed the letter, ready to send, Caleb pulled her into his arms. We're going to do this, he said. Build something real, something that lasts. We already are, Alara replied. No, I mean... He paused, searching for words. I mean something permanent, something we can leave behind. She understood what he wasn't saying. A legacy. Children, maybe, if they were blessed with them. A ranch that would outlive them both. A story of two broken people who'd found each other and built something whole. I'm ready, she said quietly. Ready for what? To marry you. To make this permanent. To stop being afraid that it'll all disappear. Caleb went very still. You're sure? I'm sure. I love you, I trust you, and I want everyone to know that we chose each other, that this isn't convenience or desperation, it's choice. He kissed her, deep and thorough, and when they finally broke apart, they were both grinning like fools. When? He asked. Soon, but I want to do it right, not some rushed ceremony because we're impatient, a real wedding, with witnesses and vows and a celebration. Whatever you want. What I want is to marry you and have everyone see that we belong together. Then that's what we'll do. They set the date for late July, giving them time to prepare and spread the word. Alara wrote to the minister, made arrangements for a simple ceremony at the church in Red Hollow. Caleb told Jamie and the ranch hands, who responded with genuine happiness and terrible jokes about him finally settling down. Word spread quickly through town. Alara braced herself for more gossip, more cruelty, but something unexpected happened instead. People started showing up at the ranch. First it was Mrs. Hadley, bringing a wedding gift, embroidered linens she'd made herself. I remember when you first came to town, she said. Thought you might not make it. Glad I was wrong. Then Dalton arrived with a bottle of good whiskey and congratulations. Always knew Mercer needed someone with some sense, he said. Figured you might be the one. Even the minister came calling, ostensibly to discuss the ceremony, but really, Alara suspected, to satisfy his curiosity. He seemed surprised to find them working side by side, clearly comfortable with each other,
clearly partners in every sense of the word. You seem well suited, he said carefully. We are, Caleb replied, leaving no room for doubt. Not everyone approved. Alara knew there were still those who gossiped, who viewed her as an opportunist and Caleb as a fool. But increasingly, she found she didn't care. The people whose opinions mattered, Dalton, Mrs. Hadley, Jamie, saw the truth. The rest could think what they liked. 3 weeks before the wedding, Alara was working in the garden she'd planted behind the house when she heard horses approaching. She looked up to see 3 riders, men she didn't recognize, rough-looking and hard-eyed. "Help you, gentlemen?" she called, keeping her voice steady despite sudden unease. The leader, a man with a scar across his cheek, looked her over dismissively. "We're here to see Mercer, ranch business. He's out with the herd, won't be back until evening." "We'll wait." Something about the way he said it made her skin prickle. "I'm afraid that's not convenient. You can come back tomorrow." "Lady, we rode 2 days to get here. We're not leaving without seeing him." Alara straightened, ignoring the way her leg protested the quick movement. "Then you can wait in town. The ranch is private property." The man's expression hardened. "You giving me orders?" Before she could respond, Jamie appeared from the barn, rifle held casually but ready. "Miss Quinn asked you politely. I suggest you listen." The 3 men assessed Jamie, calculated odds, and apparently decided discretion was wiser. The scarred man spat in the dirt. "Tell Mercer that Harris wants to talk to him about the water rights. Tell him we're not going away." They rode off, leaving dust and tension in their wake. "Who was that?" Alara asked Jamie. "Trouble," he replied grimly. "Harris runs a spread about 20 miles north. He and Mr. Mercer have been fighting over water access for years. Thought it was settled, but I guess not." When Caleb returned that evening, his face went dark as Jamie recounted what had happened. "They came here? To the house?" "I handled it," Alara said. "You shouldn't have had to." He paced the room, agitated. "Harris knows better than to bring his grievances to my home." "What's this about water rights?" Caleb sighed, ran a hand through his hair. "There's a creek that runs through my northern pasture before it crosses onto Harris's land. He claims I'm diverting too much water, that his cattle don't have enough access downstream. I've tried to work with him, but he's unreasonable." "What does the law say?" "Law says I have riparian rights. Water that crosses my property is mine to use. But Harris argues that excessive use constitutes theft." Alara thought about this. "Is there documentation, deeds, surveys, legal precedent?" "Somewhere, filed with the county probably." "Then we need to get it. Build a legal case before this escalates." "It's already escalating if he's willing to show up here and intimidate you. Which is why we need to be smart about this, not reactive." Caleb looked at her, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. The urge to confront Harris directly versus the wisdom of her counsel. Finally, he nodded. "All right, we'll do it your way. But if he comes here again, I'm not going to be polite." "Fair enough." The water dispute cast a shadow over the wedding preparations, but Alara refused to let it consume them. She made a trip to the county seat, spent 2 days researching land records and water laws, and returned with a thick file of documentation that clearly supported Caleb's position. "According to this," she told him, spreading papers across the table, "your family has had uncontested water rights to that creek for 40 years. Harris only bought his property 6 years ago. He has access to water, just not unlimited access." "So we're in the right." "Legally, yes, but that doesn't mean Harris will accept it." She was right. A week later, they discovered someone had diverted the creek, building an illegal dam that redirected water onto Harris's property. Caleb was livid. "I'm tearing it down," he said, already saddling his horse. "And then what?" "He rebuilds it. You tear it down again. This escalates into violence." "So what do you suggest? Let him steal my water?" "I suggest we file a legal complaint. Force him to deal with this through proper channels instead of letting him bait us into doing something rash." It went against every instinct Caleb had, but he trusted her judgment. They filed the complaint. The county sent someone to investigate, confirmed the dam was illegal, and ordered it removed. Harris complied, but the hostility between the 2 ranches deepened. Alara could feel it like a storm building on the horizon, waiting to break. "Maybe we should postpone the wedding," she said one night, "until this is resolved." "No!" Caleb's response was immediate and firm. "We're not letting Harris dictate our lives. We're getting married exactly when we planned. But if something happens, then we'll handle it. Together. Like we handle everything. He took her hands. I'm not waiting any longer to make you my wife. Harris doesn't get to take that from us. So they didn't wait. And as July approached, Alara felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. Not the desperate, fragile hope of someone grasping at straws, but the solid, grounded hope of someone who'd found their place in the world and was ready to claim it. The week before the wedding, Alara couldn't sleep. She'd lie awake beside Caleb, listening to his steady breathing, wondering if she was making the right choice. Not because she doubted him, she knew him now, knew his character down to the bone, but because part of her still waited for the moment when everything would be taken away. On Tuesday morning, she was kneading bread dough when the fear crystallized into something she could name. She was terrified of being happy, terrified that the moment she fully claimed this life, this love, something would destroy it. Caleb found her standing motionless at the counter, hands covered in flour, staring at nothing. Alara? She blinked, came back to herself. Sorry, I was just panicking. The word was so direct, so lacking in judgment, that it startled a laugh out of her. Yes, a little. He came to stand beside her, leaned against the counter. Want to talk about it? I don't know if I can explain it. Try anyway. She looked down at her flour-covered hands. Every good thing in my life has been temporary. My parents died. The jobs I found never lasted. The places I lived were always stepping stones to somewhere else. I've spent 28 years learning not to get attached because attachment means loss. She paused. And now I have this. You, the ranch, a life I actually want. And I keep waiting for the universe to remember it made a mistake and take it all back. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, after Sarah and Michael died, I felt like I'd been punished for being happy. Like I'd gotten too comfortable, taken too much for granted, and the world had corrected itself by taking everything that mattered. For years, I thought the lesson was not to want anything, not to care, because caring meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant pain. What changed? You did. You showed me that staying closed off wasn't protecting me. It was just another kind of death. A slower one, maybe, but death all the same. He turned to face her fully. I can't promise you nothing bad will ever happen. I can't guarantee we won't face loss or hardship or things that try to break us. But I can promise that whatever comes, we'll face it together. And that has to be enough because the alternative is living half a life out of fear. Alara felt tears prick her eyes. I'm so tired of being afraid. I know, so am I. He wiped a smudge of flour from her cheek with gentle fingers. But I'm more afraid of losing you because I wasn't brave enough to fight for this. So I'm choosing to be brave, and I'm asking you to choose it too. She kissed him then, flour and fear and all, and felt something inside her shift. Not the fear disappearing, she didn't think it ever would completely, but the decision to live despite it. I'm choosing it, she whispered against his mouth. I'm choosing us. By Wednesday, news had spread through Red Hollow that Caleb Mercer and Alara Quinn were getting married on Saturday. Reactions were mixed. Some people seemed genuinely pleased, others were quietly disapproving, and a few were openly hostile. Mrs. Hadley stopped by Thursday morning with a dress. My daughter's, she said, holding up a simple but elegant cream-colored gown. She wore it for her wedding 10 years back. Thought you might want to borrow it, seeing as you probably didn't bring wedding clothes to the frontier. Alara touched the fabric, soft cotton with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Mrs. Hadley, this is beautiful, but I couldn't. You can and you will. No sense spending money on something you'll wear once when there's a perfectly good dress right here. Besides, her voice softened. I think you deserve to look like a bride. Not for anyone else's sake, but for yours. Thank you, Alara managed, her throat tight. You're welcome. And Alara, don't let the small-minded people in this town make you doubt yourself. I've seen the way Mercer looks at you. That man's found something he thought he'd lost forever. That's worth celebrating, not condemning. After Mrs. Hadley left, Alara tried on the dress. It fit nearly perfectly, needing only minor adjustments at the waist. She stood in front of the small mirror in her room and barely recognized herself. Not because she looked different, but because she looked happy. The woman staring back at her had hope in her eyes instead of wariness, possibility instead of resignation. That evening, Jamie rode in fast just as they were finishing dinner. His face was grim. We've got trouble,
he said without preamble. Found 3 head of cattle dead up in the north pasture. Poisoned, looks like. Caleb's face went hard as stone. You're sure? They were near the creek. All 3 dropped within sight of each other. I checked the water upstream. Someone dumped something in it. Whatever it was, it's dispersed now, but it killed those cattle. Harris! The name came out flat, certain. Can't prove it, but yeah, that's my thinking too. Elara felt ice settle in her stomach. This is escalation. This is war, Caleb corrected. He stood, already reaching for his coat. I'm going over there. Caleb, wait. I'm not waiting. He poisoned my cattle. He could have poisoned the whole creek, could have killed the entire herd. I'm done playing nice. And if you go over there angry, what happens? He baits you into a fight, you end up arrested or worse, and we lose everything we've built. Elara moved to block the door. Say, please, think this through. I am thinking it through. Harris needs to know there are consequences. Legal consequences, yes, not vigilante justice. She grabbed his arm. We file a report with the sheriff. We document the deaths, test the water if we can, build a case. We do this the right way. The right way is too slow. By the time the law does anything, he could kill half my herd. Then we post guards. We protect the water sources, watch the boundaries, make sure he can't do it again. But we don't give him the satisfaction of dragging us down to his level. Jamie cleared his throat. Miss Quinn's right, boss. You're right over there hot. You're playing his game. And Harris is good at that game. He's been picking fights his whole life. But if we go legal, we've got documentation on our side. We've got proof of the water rights, proof of his illegal dam, and now proof of sabotage. Caleb looked between them, fury and reason warring across his face. Finally, he nodded sharply. Fine. We do it your way. But I want guards posted tonight, and tomorrow we're riding into town and making a formal complaint. Agreed, Elara said. They spent the night in shifts, watching the northern pasture. Caleb took first watch, then Jamie, then one of the seasonal hands. Elara stayed awake in the house, watching the darkness and wondering how much worse this would get before it got better. Friday morning, Caleb and Elara rode into Red Hollow together. The sheriff's office was a small building on the edge of town, run by a man named Porter who'd been keeping the peace for 15 years with a combination of common sense and strategic blindness to minor infractions. When they explained what had happened, he listened without interrupting, then leaned back in his chair. That's a serious accusation, he said finally. It's a serious crime, Elara replied. 3 cattle dead from poisoning, water contamination that could have killed dozens more. We have the dead animals as evidence, and we can test the creek water if needed. Even if the water's contaminated, you can't prove Harris did it. He's the only one with motive and opportunity. He's been fighting us over water rights for months. He built an illegal dam that you had removed. This is retaliation. Porter rubbed his jaw. I'll ride out, take a look at the dead cattle, talk to Harris. But unless I find direct evidence linking him to the poisoning, there's not much I can do. So he just gets away with it? Caleb's voice was dangerously quiet. I didn't say that. I said I need evidence. You want justice, you help me build a case. But you don't take matters into your own hands, that understood? It took Caleb a moment to answer. Understood. They left the sheriff's office with nothing resolved and tension crackling between them like lightning waiting to strike. Caleb was silent the entire ride home, his jaw tight and his hands hard on the reins. Say it, Elara finally said. Say what? Whatever you're thinking that's making you look like you want to hit something. He was quiet for another minute, then, I hate feeling helpless. Hate knowing that someone can destroy what's mine and I'm supposed to just wait for the law to maybe do something about it. I know, but acting rashly won't fix it. It'll just make things worse. You keep saying that, but what if you're wrong? What if the only way to stop Harris is to show him I won't tolerate this? Then you show him through strength, not violence. You protect what's yours, you build your case, and you don't give him ammunition to use against you. She paused. We're getting married tomorrow, Caleb. Please don't do something that would prevent that from happening. That got through to him. His shoulders dropped slightly, some of the fury draining away. You're right, I need to do something. I need to... Then let's reinforce the fencing around the water sources, post more guards, make it harder for him to sabotage us again. That's action. That's protection. They spent the rest of Friday doing exactly that. Jamie and the ranch hands helped string additional wire, set up watch points, organize shifts. By evening, they'd created a perimeter that would make any further sabotage difficult, if not impossible. Caleb was exhausted when he finally came inside well after dark. Alara had kept dinner warm for him, but he barely touched it. "You should sleep," she said. "Can't. Too wound up." "Try anyway. Tomorrow's important." He looked at her, and some of the hardness left his expression. "Tomorrow I marry you. That's more important than Harris, than the cattle, than any of this." "Good. Remember that when you're tempted to do something stupid." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You keep me honest." "Someone has to." They went to bed, but neither slept much. Alara could feel Caleb's restlessness beside her, the way his mind was still churning through problems and anger. She took his hand in the darkness. "Talk to me," she said. "About what?" "Anything, something good. Tell me about tomorrow." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "I've been thinking about the vows. What I want to say to you in front of everyone. And I want to promise you that I'll see you. Always. No matter what changes or what we face, I'll remember who you are beyond the surface. I'll value your mind as much as I value any other part of you. I'll trust your judgment even when it contradicts my instincts. And I'll choose you every day for as long as I'm breathing." Alara felt tears slip down her temples into her hair. "That's more than I ever thought anyone would promise me." "What will you promise me?" She thought about it carefully. "I'll promise to be brave, to not let fear make me small or cautious when boldness is needed. I'll promise to challenge you when you're wrong and support you when you're right. I'll promise to build something lasting with you, something bigger than either of us alone. And I'll promise to believe that I deserve this, deserve you, even when old voices tell me otherwise." Those are good promises. They're the only ones I can make honestly. He pulled her closer, wrapped around her in the darkness. "Then they're enough." Saturday dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect summer day that seemed designed for celebration. Alara woke early, nerves fluttering in her stomach. This was it. The day she'd stopped believing would ever come. Mrs. Hadley arrived mid-morning to help her dress and fix her hair. Alara had never been good at such things. Her mother had died before she could teach her, and she'd spent her adult life prioritizing practicality over prettiness. But Mrs. Hadley had gentle hands and patient instruction, and slowly, Alara's hair was pinned into something elegant, small flowers woven through the dark strands. "There," Mrs. Hadley said, stepping back. "Look at yourself." Alara turned to the mirror and caught her breath. The woman looking back at her was transformed, not into someone else, but into the best version of herself. The dress flowed gracefully despite her uneven stance. Her hair framed her face softly, and her eyes held something she barely recognized: joy. "I look beautiful," Mrs. Hadley finished firmly. "You look beautiful. Don't argue with me." Alara smiled despite herself. "I wasn't going to." "Good. Now, the ceremony's at 2:00. We should leave by 1:30 to get you there in time. Caleb's already in town. Stayed at the hotel last night so you two wouldn't see each other before the wedding. Jamie's bringing the wagon around to take you." The next hour passed in a blur of final preparations. Alara tried to eat but couldn't manage more than a few bites. Her hands shook slightly as she pulled on the simple white gloves Mrs. Hadley had lent her. This was real. This was happening. Jamie arrived exactly on time, dressed in his best clothes and grinning widely. "You look real nice, Miss Quinn." "Thank you, Jamie." "Mr. Mercer's going to lose his mind when he sees you." The ride into town felt both endless and too short. Alara watched the familiar landscape roll past, the pastures she'd come to know, the creek where she and Caleb sometimes sat in the evenings, the road she'd traveled countless times for supplies. All of it would soon be officially hers, not just in practice, but in law. Red Hollow's church was small but well-maintained, white-clapboard with a simple steeple. As they approached, Alara could see people gathering, more than she'd expected. Dalton was there, of course, and Mrs. Hadley. The minister stood on the steps, and others she recognized from town, some friendly, some neutral, some whose presence surprised her. Jamie helped her down from the wagon carefully, and she took a moment to steady herself. Her leg ached from sitting, but she pushed the discomfort aside. This was not the day to let limitations define her. Mrs. Hadley met her at the church steps. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be." He's inside, waiting for you. Alara took a breath and walked into the church. The interior was simple: wooden pews, plain glass windows, a modest altar. And standing there, dressed in a dark suit she'd never seen him wear, was Caleb. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and the expression that crossed his face made every moment of fear and doubt worth it. He looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his entire life. She walked down the aisle slowly, her uneven gait marking each step, aware of every eye on her but focused only on him. When she reached the altar, he took her hand and she felt the slight tremor in his fingers. He was nervous too. "You're beautiful," he said quietly, just for her. "So are you." The minister cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The ceremony was simple. Traditional vows exchanged without embellishment, but with absolute conviction. When Caleb promised to love and honor her, his voice was steady and sure. When Alara promised the same, she meant every word with a depth that surprised her. Then came the moment for personal vows. Caleb went first. "Alara, when you came into my life, I was surviving but not living. I'd convinced myself that being alone was safer than risking my heart again. But you showed me that real strength isn't in walls. It's in choosing to be vulnerable anyway. You see me clearly, challenge me constantly, and love me despite my flaws. I promise to do the same for you. I promise to value your mind, trust your judgment, and never make you feel less than you are. I promise to build a life with you that honors both our strengths and our scars. And I promise to choose you every single day for as long as I draw breath." Alara's vision blurred with tears, but she blinked them back. Her turn. "Caleb, you asked me once who I was beyond what others see. I didn't have a good answer then because I'd spent so long being defined by my limitations that I'd forgotten I was more than them. But you taught me to see myself differently. You taught me that worth isn't measured by perfection, that partnership means complementing each other's strengths, and that love means being seen completely and chosen anyway. I promise to be brave enough to claim this life we're building. I promise to trust in us even when fear tells me not to. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, and I promise to never forget that I deserve this, deserve you, deserve us." The minister pronounced them married, and Caleb kissed her with a tenderness that made the small congregation murmur approvingly. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, they turned to face the witnesses as husband and wife. The reception was held in Dalton's general store, which he'd cleared and decorated with surprising care. There was food, simple but plentiful, and drinks, and music provided by a man with a fiddle and another with a harmonica. People congratulated them, some with genuine warmth, others with polite distance. Whitmore appeared briefly, looking uncomfortable. "Congratulations," he said stiffly to Caleb, then to Alara. "I hope you'll be very happy." "We will be," Alara replied, not unkindly, but without warmth either. His opinion no longer mattered to her. She'd moved beyond needing his validation or suffering from his rejection. The afternoon wore on in a pleasant blur. Alara danced with Caleb carefully, accommodating her limp but genuinely joyful. She accepted congratulations, cut cake, laughed at Jamie's increasingly terrible jokes as he got into the whiskey. She was standing with Mrs. Hadley, watching Caleb talk to Dalton, when one of the women from the church approached. It was the brunette who'd called her a cripple in the mercantile. "Mrs. Mercer," the woman said, the title sounding strange in her mouth. "Yes?" "I wanted to, that is," she struggled visibly. "What I said to you before, in Whitmore's store. It was cruel. I'm sorry." Alara studied her, looking for insincerity but finding only genuine discomfort. "Why are you apologizing now?" "Because I was wrong. I judged you without knowing you, made assumptions based on appearance rather than character. And watching you today, seeing the way Mercer looks at you, the way you carry yourself, I realized I was speaking from my own bitterness rather than truth. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't undo the hurt. But it was honest, and Alara appreciated that. "Thank you," she said. "I accept your apology." The woman nodded, relief crossing her face, and moved away. "That took courage," Mrs. Hadley observed. "Yes, it did." Alara watched the woman rejoin her friends. "Doesn't make what she said right, but at least she acknowledged it. You're more forgiving than I'd be. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just too happy to hold on to anger today." As the sun began to set, Caleb found her on the porch of the store, looking out at the town that had rejected her and then slowly accepted her. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Home. The word settled into her bones with perfect rightness. Yes. They said their goodbyes and climbed into the wagon. Jamie had already left, giving them privacy for the ride back. As they left Red Hollow behind, Alara leaned against Caleb's shoulder, exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. "We did it," she said. "We did. I'm your wife." "You are." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "How does it feel?" She thought about it honestly. "Terrifying and perfect, like standing on the edge of something vast and unknown, but knowing I'm not alone in it. That's exactly how it feels." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, watching the landscape turn golden in the dying light. Then Caleb said, "There's something I need to tell you." The seriousness in his tone made her sit up. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. It's just, I talked to the sheriff this morning before the ceremony. He investigated the cattle poisoning. And? He couldn't prove Harris did it. No direct evidence. But he warned Harris that any further incidents would result in serious consequences, and he's sending someone to patrol our boundary lines for the next few weeks. That's something, at least. It's not enough. Harris got away with it. He killed my cattle and faced no real punishment." Alara heard the frustration beneath his words, the helpless anger. "I know, but we're stronger than he is, Caleb. We have the law on our side, we have documentation, and we have each other. He's alone and bitter and fighting a losing battle. Eventually, he'll realize that. And if he doesn't, then we keep fighting, together, like we promised we would." She took his hand. "But we don't let him poison today. Today is ours. Tomorrow we can worry about Harris. Tonight, let's just be married." She saw him struggle with it, saw the moment he chose to let it go. "You're right. Tonight is ours." They arrived at the ranch as full darkness fell. The house looked different somehow, warmer, more welcoming, like it knew something fundamental had changed. Caleb carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition, at the absurdity and sweetness of it. Inside, he set her down gently, and they stood in the main room, still in their wedding clothes, looking at each other with a kind of wonder. "I can't believe this is real," Alara said. "It's real." He took her hands. "You're my wife. This is our home. We built this together, and we're going to keep building it." "I love you. I love you too." They made love that night with a tenderness born of commitment and choice, and when they finally fell asleep tangled together, Alara felt something she'd never experienced before. Security. Not the fragile security of hoping things would work out, but the solid security of knowing that whatever came, they'd face it together. She woke before dawn, as was her habit, but didn't rise immediately. Instead, she lay there watching Caleb sleep, his face peaceful in the gray pre-dawn light. Her husband. Her partner. Her choice. Outside, she could hear the ranch waking up, cattle lowing, horses moving in the pasture, the familiar sounds of a working property. This was hers now. Not in the tenuous way it had been when she was just an employee, but fully and legally. She was Alara Mercer, co-owner of a thriving ranch, partner to a man who valued her completely. She thought about this woman who'd stepped off the stagecoach 9 months ago, desperate, rejected, convinced she'd never find a place to belong. That woman seemed like a stranger now. Not because Alara had changed fundamentally, but because she'd finally found circumstances that allowed her to be fully herself. Caleb stirred beside her, opened his eyes, and smiled. "Morning, wife." "Morning, husband. How does it feel? Day 1 of being married?" "Ask me again in 50 years. He laughed, pulled her close. "I will. That's a promise." They rose and began their day, coffee, breakfast, the familiar rhythm of work. But everything felt different now, weighted with permanence and possibility. When Caleb kissed her goodbye before heading out to check the cattle, it wasn't just affection. It was commitment. When Alara sat down at the desk to work on the ledgers, it wasn't just a job. It was building their future. Around mid-morning, a rider appeared on the horizon. As he got closer, Alara recognized him as one of Harris's ranch hands. Her stomach tightened. She met him outside, keeping her expression neutral. "Can I help you?" The man looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I've got a message from Mr. Harris. He wants to meet with you and Mr. Mercer.
Says he's willing to discuss the water situation. Why the sudden change of heart? Don't know, ma'am. Just delivering the message. He said tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock, at the creek boundary, neutral ground. I'll discuss it with my husband and send word. The man nodded and rode off. Alara stood watching him go, unease prickling along her spine. Harris didn't strike her as the type to suddenly want peaceful negotiation. This felt like a trap. When Caleb returned for lunch, she told him about the message. His reaction was immediate suspicion. He's up to something. I agree. But what? Maybe he's trying to lure us away from the ranch so he can sabotage something else. Or maybe he wants to confront us somewhere without witnesses. Or maybe the sheriff's warning actually scared him and he genuinely wants to settle this. Caleb gave her a skeptical look. You believe that? No, but I think we should go anyway. Why? Because if we refuse, we look afraid. And if he is genuinely trying to negotiate, we'd be fools to dismiss the opportunity. But we go prepared. We bring Jamie, maybe one of the other hands. We make sure someone knows where we are and when to expect us back. We don't walk into this blind. He considered it, then nodded slowly. All right. But at the first sign of trouble, we leave. Agreed. They sent word back to Harris accepting the meeting, then spent the rest of the day preparing. Caleb checked his rifle, made sure the ammunition was good. He briefed Jamie and the other ranch hands, established signals, created a plan. Alara went over everything they had documented about the water rights, preparing their legal position. That night, lying in bed, Caleb said, I don't like this. Neither do I. We could still back out. We could. But then what? Live in constant tension, waiting for the next attack? I'd rather face this head on. Even if it's dangerous? We've survived dangerous before. We'll survive this too. He was quiet for a moment, then, when did you get so brave? When I married a man who taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Alara tried to work but couldn't focus. Caleb was restless, checking and rechecking equipment. Finally, at 1:30, they saddled horses and rode out with Jamie following at a discreet distance. The creek boundary was a 20-minute ride north. As they approached, Alara could see Harris waiting with 2 of his men. He was a big man, thick through the shoulders, with a face that spoke of years spent fighting the land and anyone who got in his way. Caleb and Alara dismounted, keeping the horses between themselves and Harris. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Mercer, Harris said by way of greeting. Harris, and this must be the new wife. Heard you got married. This is Alara, my partner in all things. Harris's eyes traveled over her dismissively, lingering on her uneven stance. Interesting choice. I didn't come here for your commentary on my marriage, Caleb said, his voice hard. You said you wanted to talk about the water. I do. Here's the situation. That creek feeds both our properties. You've been taking more than your share and it's affecting my operation. I want it split fair, 50-50. The law says I have riparian rights. The water crosses my land first. I'm entitled to reasonable use. Reasonable use doesn't mean draining the whole damn creek, Alara spoke up. We've documented our water usage. It's well within legal limits. Your property still receives adequate flow for livestock and irrigation. This isn't about fairness. This is about you wanting more than you're entitled to. Harris's face darkened. I don't recall asking for your opinion. You asked for a meeting. You got one. I'm half owner of that ranch now, which means you're dealing with both of us. Half owner, Harris scoffed. That's generous. What did you do to earn that? Marry him after his brain went soft with loneliness? Caleb took a step forward, but Alara's hand on his arm stopped him. Mr. Harris, she said, her voice ice cold, you can insult me all you want. It won't change the law. You have no legal claim to increased water rights. The county has already ruled in our favor. This meeting is pointless unless you're willing to accept reality. Reality is that I've got more men, more resources, and more willingness to fight than you do. Is that a threat? It's a fact. You can hide behind the law all you want, but out here the law moves slow. Accidents happen, cattle die, property gets damaged. Would be a shame if something happened to that nice ranch of yours. Caleb's hand moved toward his rifle, but again Alara stopped him. We're done here, she said firmly. You've made your position clear. We've made ours clear. If you continue to sabotage our property or threaten us,
We'll pursue every legal remedy available. And trust me, Mr. Harris, I'm very good with legal documents." She turned to leave, but Harris's next words stopped her cold. "Your husband's first wife and kid died of cholera, didn't they? Terrible thing, disease. Never know when it might come back around." The implication was clear and vicious. Alara felt Caleb go rigid beside her. "You threatening my family?" Caleb's voice was deadly quiet. "Just making conversation, pointing out that sometimes bad things happen to good people, or to people who make bad choices." "Let's go," Alara said, pulling Caleb toward the horses. "He's trying to bait you. Don't give him what he wants." They mounted quickly, but Harris wasn't finished. "One more thing, Mercer. That California buyer who offered to purchase your herd, he's my brother-in-law. I told him all about your operation, about how you're having water troubles, cattle dying mysterious, about how you're barely holding things together. He's going to withdraw his offer." Alara's heart sank. That sale would have been transformative for the ranch. Losing it would hurt them badly. But Caleb just smiled, a cold, hard smile that held no humor. "That's interesting, Harris, because I've got the contract right here, signed and sealed 2 days ago. Your brother-in-law already committed to the purchase. He backs out now. He's in breach and will sue. So thanks for the heads up, but you're too late." It was a bluff. They hadn't finalized the contract yet. But Harris didn't know that. The older man's face went purple with rage. "You're lying." "Am I? Feel free to ask him. In the meantime, stay off my property, stop sabotaging my water, and leave my wife out of your petty grievances, or the next conversation we have will be in front of a judge." They rode away before Harris could respond, Jamie falling in behind them. None of them spoke until they were well out of earshot. Then Caleb let out a long breath. "That was close. Too close," Alara agreed. "And that bluff about the contract, we need to make it real. Fast." "I know. I'll send a telegram tomorrow. Push for immediate finalization." "What if his brother-in-law really does try to back out? Then we find another buyer. We've got options. Harris thinks he can control everything, but he's wrong." When they got back to the ranch, Alara was shaking. Not from fear exactly, but from the adrenaline crash. Caleb noticed immediately. "You all right?" "I will be. That was just intense." "Yeah." He pulled her close. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that. With him." "I'm not. We're partners. We face things together, remember?" "Still, the way he talked about you, the threats, were empty posturing from a desperate man. He knows he's losing and he's lashing out." She looked up at Caleb. "But we need to be careful. Desperate men do stupid things." They increased security that night. More guards, tighter watch rotations, weapons kept close. Alara slept fitfully, waking at every sound, every shift in the darkness. The next morning, Caleb sent the telegram to the California buyer, emphasizing the urgency of finalizing their agreement. Then he and Alara sat down to plan their next moves. "We need to assume Harris will escalate," Alara said. "What's our worst-case scenario? He sabotages the ranch badly enough that we can't fulfill the California contract. Or he hurts someone. Me, you, Jamie, one of the hands. Can we prevent that? We can make it harder. Post more guards, vary our routines, never be alone in vulnerable positions." He paused. "But Alara, if this gets too dangerous, don't suggest I leave or hide or stop being involved. We're in this together." "I was going to say, if it gets too dangerous, we consider selling and starting over somewhere else." That surprised her. "You'd leave the ranch?" "I'd leave anything to keep you safe. The ranch is important, but you're essential." Alara felt her throat tighten. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. 3 days later, a response came from the California buyer. The contract was finalized, with payment to be delivered upon receipt of the cattle. They'd won. Harris's bluff had failed, but victory felt hollow when, that same afternoon, they discovered someone had cut the fences on the eastern pasture and scattered 100 head of cattle across open range. It would take days to round them all up, and some they'd likely never recover. "This is getting worse," Jamie said grimly as they surveyed the damage. "I know," Caleb replied, "but we keep fighting. We fix this. We secure the boundaries better, and we don't give him the satisfaction of breaking us." As the sun set over the scattered cattle and broken fences, Alara stood beside her husband and felt the weight of what they were facing. This wasn't going to end peacefully.
Harris was escalating, and eventually someone was going to get hurt. But as Caleb took her hand and they walked back toward the house together, she also felt something else: determination. They'd built this life against incredible odds. They'd found each other when both of them thought they'd be alone forever. And whatever came next, they'd face it the same way they'd faced everything else. Together. They spent the next week rounding up the scattered cattle, working dawn to dusk in brutal summer heat. Every day brought new exhaustion, new frustration, and the constant awareness that Harris could strike again at any moment. Elara worked alongside Caleb and the ranch hands where she could, managing logistics, coordinating search areas, keeping meticulous records of what they'd recovered and what remained lost. By the end of the week, they'd found 87 of the 100 missing cattle. 13 were gone, either dead, stolen, or wandered so far they'd never be recovered. The financial loss was significant, but not catastrophic. The emotional toll was worse. Caleb was running himself ragged. Elara would wake in the night to find his side of the bed empty, would discover him in the barn or out checking fence lines at 3 in the morning. He barely ate, spoke in clipped sentences, and carried tension in every line of his body. "You're going to collapse if you keep this up," she told him one evening after he'd come in well past dark, covered in dust and exhausted. "I'll rest when we've secured the property. The property will never be completely secure, not as long as Harris is determined to sabotage us." "Then I won't rest." Elara set down the plate of food she'd been warming for him and crossed her arms. "That's not sustainable, and you know it." "What do you want me to do, Elara? Just accept that he's going to destroy everything we've built?" "No. I want you to be strategic instead of reactive. I want you to trust that we have systems in place, that Jamie and the hands can handle night watch without you micromanaging every detail. I want you to remember that you're not alone in this fight." He slumped into a chair, rubbed his face with both hands. "I know, I keep thinking about what he said, about Sarah and Michael, about disease coming back. What if he tries to—" "He won't. Because unlike disease, Harris is a human being who can be held accountable. We've documented everything. We have the sheriff aware of the situation. We're not helpless. We're not invincible either." "No, but we're together, and that counts for something." He reached for her, pulled her down into his lap despite her protest about being too heavy. "It counts for everything," he said against her hair. "You count for everything. If something happened to you because of this feud, nothing's going to happen to me, or to you. We're careful, we're prepared, and we're smarter than Harris. He's angry and desperate. We're strategic and united. That's an advantage." He wanted to believe her. She could see it in his eyes, the way he wanted to trust that being careful would be enough. But he'd lost people before. He knew that sometimes being careful didn't matter. "Promise me something," he said. "What?" "If this escalates beyond what we can handle, you'll leave. You'll go somewhere safe while I deal with it." "Absolutely not." "Elara, no. I'm not leaving you to face danger alone. That's not who we are. I'm trying to protect you, and I'm trying to protect us. Both of us. Together." She framed his face with her hands, made him look at her. "I didn't marry you so I could run at the first sign of trouble. I married you so we could build a life worth protecting, and I can't do that if I'm not here." He kissed her, hard and desperate, and she kissed him back with equal intensity. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "So much it terrifies me." "I know, I feel the same way." They went to bed early that night, both too exhausted for anything but sleep. But as Elara lay in the darkness, listening to Caleb's breathing even out, she made a decision. She couldn't control what Harris did, but she could control how they responded. And she was done being reactive. The next morning, while Caleb was out checking the northern pasture, Elara rode into town. She went straight to the sheriff's office and found Porter reviewing paperwork at his desk. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, surprised. "What brings you in?" "I need to file a formal complaint and request protection." She laid out everything: the poisoned cattle, the cut fences, the threats Harris had made, the pattern of escalating violence. Porter listened, taking notes, his expression growing more serious with each detail. "This is more extensive than I realized," he said when she finished. "That's because we've been trying to handle it quietly, hoping Harris would back down. But he's not backing down. He's getting worse. And I'm concerned that someone's going to get seriously hurt if this continues." "What do you want me to do?" I want you to arrest him for the documented crimes. I want protection for our property until this is resolved, and I want it made clear that any further incidents will result in serious legal consequences. Porter leaned back in his chair. Arresting him without solid evidence of the specific crimes is difficult, but I can increase patrols near your property, and I can pay Harris another visit, make it clear that we're watching him closely. That's not enough. It's what I can do within the bounds of the law, Mrs. Mercer, unless you have direct evidence linking him to the sabotage. Witnesses, physical proof, something concrete. My hands are tied. Alara felt frustration rise, but pushed it down. Then help me get that evidence. Come out to the ranch, examine the cut fences, talk to our ranch hands, document everything officially, build a case that will hold up in court. Porter considered this. All right, I can do that. Give me 2 days to clear my schedule, and I'll come out for a full investigation. Thank you. She left the sheriff's office feeling marginally better. At least they were taking official action instead of just reacting to each new crisis. At least there would be documentation, evidence, a legal foundation if this went to trial. Her next stop was Dalton's store. She found the older man organizing stock and greeted him warmly.
Alara, how are you holding up?
We're managing. I need a favor. Name it. I need you to spread the word that we're looking to hire additional hands, preferably men who aren't afraid of trouble and can handle themselves in a fight if necessary. Dalton's eyebrows rose. Things getting that bad with Harris? Things are getting serious enough that we need more security. I'd rather be overprepared than understaffed if something happens. I'll put the word out. But Alara, you be careful. Harris has a reputation for not backing down, and men with that kind of pride do stupid things when they're cornered. I know. That's why we're preparing. Over the next few days, 3 new men showed up at the ranch looking for work. Caleb interviewed each one carefully, assessing not just their ranching skills, but their character and their willingness to stand firm if trouble came. 2 of them he hired immediately. Both were veterans of range wars in other territories, men who knew how to handle cattle and handle conflict. With the expanded crew, they established better security protocols. Round-the-clock patrols, check-in systems, emergency signals. The ranch started to feel less like a home and more like a fortification, but it was necessary. The sheriff came out as promised, spent a full day examining evidence and interviewing everyone who'd witnessed the sabotage. He took photographs of the cut fences, collected samples from the poisoned water, documented everything meticulously. This is good work, he told Alara as he was leaving. Thorough. If we can connect any of this definitively to Harris, we'll have a strong case. What are the chances of that? Honestly, not great. Unless we catch him in the act or someone from his crew talks, it's all circumstantial. But it shows a pattern, and that matters. Makes it harder for him to claim innocence if anything else happens. It wasn't the answer Alara wanted, but it was realistic. She thanked Porter and watched him ride away, then returned to the work of keeping the ranch running. August brought oppressive heat and a tension that seemed to mirror the weather, heavy, building, waiting to break. The California buyers were scheduled to arrive in 3 weeks to collect the cattle. Everything hinged on getting through the next few weeks without major incident. They almost made it. On a Tuesday evening, 2 weeks before the scheduled sale, Caleb and Jamie were checking the southern fence line when they found it. Someone had started a fire in the dry grass near the boundary, clearly hoping it would spread to the pastures where the cattle grazed. Fortunately, the wind had shifted and the fire had burned itself out against a rocky outcropping before it could spread far. But the intent was unmistakable. This was no longer about water rights or business disputes. This was attempted destruction. Caleb rode back to the ranch at a gallop, his face dark with fury. That's it. I'm done playing by the rules. What are you planning to do? Alara asked, dread pooling in her stomach. I'm going to Harris's ranch and ending this, one way or another. That's exactly what he wants. He's baiting you into a confrontation where he has the advantage. I don't care anymore. He tried to burn us out. He could have killed the cattle, could have burned down buildings, could have killed someone if the wind had been different. This stops now. Then we do it legally. We take this evidence to the sheriff, we press charges, we let the law handle it. The law isn't handling it. We've filed complaints, we've documented everything, and nothing changes. He keeps escalating and there are no consequences. So you're going to ride over there and what? Shoot him? Beat him? That makes you the criminal, Caleb. That gives him exactly what he needs to have you arrested. At least it would be over. Alara stepped in front of him, blocked his path to the door. No. I won't let you throw away everything we've built because you're angry. Get out of my way, Alara. No. They stood there, locked in a battle of wills, the air between them crackling with tension. Finally, Caleb's shoulders sagged. I can't just do nothing. You're not doing nothing. You're being smart. We document the fire, we report it, we add it to the evidence, and we prepare for the fact that Harris might try again before the buyers arrive. And if he succeeds next time, if someone gets hurt, then we deal with it. But we don't hand him a victory by acting rashly. Caleb wanted to argue. She could see it in every line of his body, but he also trusted her judgment, even when it contradicted his instincts. Fine, he said finally. We do it your way. But I'm posting guards on every boundary, and if anyone sees Harris or his men near our property, I'm responding with force. Fair enough. They reported the fire to Sheriff Porter, who came out again to investigate. He agreed it was arson, agreed it was likely Harris, but still couldn't make an arrest without proof. I'm sorry, he said to both of them. I know this is frustrating, but my hands are tied without evidence. After he left, Alara sat at the kitchen table and tried to think strategically. They had security in place. They had documentation. They had the sale coming up in 2 weeks. What they didn't have was a way to stop Harris from trying again. Unless. An idea formed, risky and potentially brilliant. She turned it over in her mind, examining it from every angle, looking for flaws. It wasn't perfect, but it might work. She found Caleb in the barn, mucking out stalls with violent efficiency. I have an idea, she said. He paused, leaning on the pitchfork. I'm listening. What if we give Harris exactly what he wants? You've lost me. He wants a confrontation. He wants us to react. He's been escalating specifically to provoke us into doing something stupid. So what if we let him think it worked? Caleb set down the pitchfork. Explain. We spread word through town that you've had enough, that you're planning to confront Harris directly. We make sure it gets back to him. Then we set up a meeting, public, witnessed, with the sheriff present, but hidden. We let Harris make threats, let him incriminate himself, and we record all of it. That's entrapment. It's giving him rope to hang himself. He's already committed crimes. We're just creating an opportunity for him to admit it in front of witnesses. Caleb thought about it. It's risky. If something goes wrong, if he brings armed men, if it turns violent, that's why we control the circumstances. We choose the location, we have the sheriff there for protection, we don't go in unprepared. You really think he'd confess to what he's done? I think his ego is bigger than his common sense. I think if he believes he's won, if he thinks we're beaten and desperate, he'll gloat. And men who gloat talk too much. A slow smile spread across Caleb's face. You're devious. I'm practical. So what do you think? I think it's the best plan we've got. They spent the next 2 days setting it up carefully. Caleb went into town and made a scene at the saloon, loudly declaring that he was done with Harris's games and planning to settle this like men. He made sure plenty of people heard, knowing word would spread fast. Meanwhile, Alara met with Sheriff Porter and explained the plan. He was hesitant at first, worried about the legality, but she pointed out that they weren't forcing Harris to do anything illegal. They were simply creating an opportunity for him to make his own choices. If he threatens us, that's his decision, she argued. If he admits to the sabotage, that's his decision. We're not entrapping him. We're just putting him in a situation where his true character shows. Porter finally agreed with conditions. He'd be present with deputies, hidden but ready to intervene if things turned violent. The meeting would be in a public space, the same creek boundary where they'd met before, and Caleb would not be armed, to avoid any claim of threatening behavior. This is your one chance, Porter warned. If it doesn't work, if he doesn't incriminate himself, you need to let the law handle this through normal channels. Understood, Alara said. They sent word to Harris through one of his ranch hands. Caleb Mercer wanted to meet to discuss terms of surrender regarding the water rights. The phrasing was deliberately weak, suggesting defeat. Harris agreed immediately. The night before the meeting, Alara couldn't sleep. She lay awake running through every possible outcome, every way this could go wrong. Beside her, Caleb was equally restless. Are you scared? She asked quietly. Terrified. You? Same. We could still back out. We could. But then what? Keep living like this, waiting for the next attack, never knowing when it'll end? No, you're right. We need to end this. He rolled to face her in the darkness. But if anything happens to you tomorrow, it won't. We're being careful. We have the sheriff there. This is as safe as we can make it. Promise me anyway. Promise that if it goes wrong, you'll get out. Don't try to be brave. Don't try to protect me. Just run." Alara wanted to argue, but the fear in his voice stopped her. "I promise, and you promise me the same. Deal." They held each other in the darkness, drawing strength from proximity, from the solid reality of each other's presence. Whatever happened tomorrow, they'd face it together, and that would have to be enough. Morning came too soon and too slow at once. Alara dressed carefully in practical clothes, pulled her hair back severely, tried to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. Caleb was already up, checking and rechecking the plan with Jamie. "You'll stay with the cattle," he was saying. "Keep them secure. If this goes bad and we're not back by sundown, you take Alara and get her to town. Understand?" "Yes, sir, but it won't come to that." "Probably not. But if it does—" Jamie nodded, his young face serious. They rode out at noon, giving themselves time to get into position before the 2 o'clock meeting. Sheriff Porter and his deputies were already there when they arrived, concealed in the brush along the creek bank with a clear line of sight to the meeting spot. "Remember," Porter said quietly, "let him talk. Don't interrupt, don't argue. Just let him say whatever he's going to say. I'll step in if he makes direct threats or if things turn physical." Caleb and Alara took their positions in the open area by the creek, the same spot where they'd met Harris before. Alara's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her leg ached from the ride, but she forced herself to stand straight, to look calm, even though she felt anything but. At exactly 2 o'clock, Harris appeared with 3 of his men. He looked pleased with himself, confident in a way that made Alara's skin crawl. "Mercer," he called out as he approached, "got your message. About time you came to your senses." "I'm here to discuss terms," Caleb said, his voice flat. "Terms?" Harris laughed. "You're in no position to negotiate terms, but I'm feeling generous today, so I'll hear you out. I want the sabotage to stop. The poisoned cattle, the cut fences, the fire. It ends now." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do, and I'm willing to compromise on the water rights if you stop attacking my property." Harris's smile widened. "See, that's where you're wrong. I don't need you to compromise. I've already won. Your cattle are dying, your fences keep mysteriously falling apart, and that big sale you're counting on? I've got friends in California who can make that disappear too. So you admit you've been sabotaging the ranch. I admit I've been teaching you a lesson about who really runs things in this territory. Men like you, Mercer. You think you can come in here with your fancy wife and your book learning and change how things work. But this is my land, my water, my territory, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep it that way." Alara spoke up, keeping her voice steady. "Including attempted arson? That fire you set could have killed people." Harris turned his attention to her, his expression ugly. "You should have left when you had the chance, cripple. Should have realized you didn't belong here." "Careful, Harris," Caleb warned, his voice dangerous. "Or what? You'll do something about it? I've got 3 men here and you've got nothing. You came here weak, begging for mercy. That's all you are, weak, both of you." "I'd say that's enough," Sheriff Porter's voice rang out as he stepped from concealment, deputies flanking him. "Travis Harris, you're under arrest for criminal sabotage, destruction of property, and attempted arson." The color drained from Harris's face. This was a setup. This was you confessing to multiple crimes in front of witnesses," Porter corrected. "Deputies, take him into custody." Harris's men immediately backed away, hands raised to show they weren't involved. Harris himself tried to run, but he didn't get far before the deputies had him restrained. "You can't do this," he shouted. "I've got rights." "You had rights," Porter said calmly. "You gave them up when you committed crimes and then bragged about them. Take him to town." As the deputies hauled Harris away, still shouting threats and protests, Alara felt her knees go weak with relief. Caleb caught her, held her steady. "It's over," he said, wonder in his voice. "It's actually over." "Almost," Porter said, walking over to them. "I'll need both of you to come to town tomorrow and give formal statements. And there'll be a trial, which means testifying. But yes, the immediate threat is done. Harris will be in jail until the circuit judge arrives, and based on what we just heard, he's looking at serious prison time." "Thank you," Alara said, "for trusting us on this. Thank you for being smart about it.
If you'd gone the other route, if Mercer had tried to handle this with his fists, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. Porter tipped his hat. You two make a good team. After he left, Caleb and Alara stood alone by the creek, the sound of water flowing peacefully over stones, the only noise besides their own breathing. I can't believe that worked, Caleb said. I can. Harris's ego was always bigger than his brain. He couldn't resist the opportunity to gloat. You're brilliant, you know that. I'm practical, there's a difference. He pulled her close, kissed her thoroughly. When they broke apart, both slightly breathless, he said, We should get back. Let Jamie know everything's all right. They rode home slowly, letting the horses set an easy pace, both of them processing what had just happened. The threat that had hung over them for months was gone, just like that, because they'd been smart instead of reactive, strategic instead of emotional. Jamie met them at the barn, anxiety written all over his face. When they told him what had happened, his whoop of joy startled the horses. That's incredible. I can't believe you got him to confess.
Neither can I, Caleb admitted. But it's done. It's finally done. That night, they celebrated simply. Good food, better whiskey, and the profound relief of knowing they were safe. The ranch hands joined them, and there was laughter and storytelling and a lightness that hadn't existed in weeks. Later, in bed, Alara curled against Caleb's side and felt true peace for the first time since the conflict began. What are you thinking? He asked. That we survived. That we did it together. That we're stronger than I realized. We are, but we also got lucky. Maybe. But we made our own luck by being smart and careful and refusing to play his game. Caleb was quiet for a moment. When this started, when Harris first came to the house and intimidated you, I wanted to charge over there and beat him senseless. Would have felt good in the moment, but it would have ruined everything. Probably. You stopped me from doing that. Every time I wanted to react with violence or in anger, you pushed me toward strategy, toward thinking instead of just acting. That's what partners do, balance each other. Yeah, but it's more than that. You saw solutions I couldn't see because you weren't blinded by emotion. You were afraid. I know you were. But you didn't let fear make you reckless or paralyzed. You turned it into focus. Alara considered this. I think I spent so long being afraid of everything, rejection, failure, being hurt, that I learned how to function through fear. Not ignore it, but work alongside it. That's a gift. Maybe. Or maybe it's just survival instinct turned into something useful. They fell silent, comfortable in the darkness. Then Caleb said, The California buyers arrive next week. I know. After that sale goes through, we'll have enough money to expand. Buy more land, increase the herd, maybe hire permanent help so we're not running ourselves ragged every season. Is that what you want? I want to build something that lasts. Something we can pass down if we're lucky enough to have children. Something that proves we were here and we mattered. Alara felt tears prick her eyes. I want that too. Then that's what we'll do, together. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. They gathered the cattle designated for sale, organized the paperwork, ensured everything was in order. Caleb was meticulous, checking and rechecking every detail. Alara managed the business end, confirming arrangements with the buyers, verifying payment terms, making sure the contract was airtight. When the California buyers arrived, they were impressed by what they saw. Quality cattle, well-maintained property, professional organization. The sale went smoothly, and when they left 3 days later, they left behind a bank draft that represented more money than Caleb had ever seen in one place. This is real, he said, staring at the draft. This actually worked. Of course it worked. We're good at what we do. We are. He looked at her with something like awe. A year ago, I was barely breaking even. Now we're profitable, expanding, building something real. And it's because of you. It's because of us, Alara corrected. You built the foundation. I just helped make it more efficient. You did a lot more than that. You saved this ranch. You saved me. And you saved me right back. That's how partnerships work. They use part of the money to buy adjacent land that had come up for sale, expanding their territory and water access significantly. They hired 2 permanent ranch hands to supplement Jamie and the seasonal workers. They invested in better equipment, improved the buildings, and set aside reserves for future needs. By late September, the ranch was transformed. What had been a struggling one-man operation was now a thriving enterprise with solid foundations and real growth potential. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over their expanded property, Alara said, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Whitmore had accepted me?" Caleb considered it. "You'd probably be running his mercantile by now, tripling his profits while he took all the credit." She laughed. "Probably, but I wouldn't be here. Wouldn't be with you." "No, you wouldn't." He took her hand. "I used to think his rejection was cruel. Now I think it was the best thing that ever happened to both of us, because it brought you here. To a man who saw past what I lacked to what I offered. To a woman who saw past my grief to who I could still be." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade. Then Alara said, "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Caleb turned to her slowly, his expression unreadable. "What?" "I'm pregnant. About 2 months along, I think. I wasn't sure at first, but now I am." We're... He couldn't seem to finish a sentence. "Yes." He pulled her close, held her so tightly she could barely breathe. When he finally released her, there were tears on his face. "I never thought... After Sarah and Michael, I never thought I'd have this again." "Are you happy about it?" She needed to hear him say it. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Terrified, yes, but happy, so happy. He pressed his hand to her still flat stomach. "We're having a baby." "We are." "When?" "Late March, early April, probably." He kissed her, gentle and reverent. "We're going to do this right. We're going to give this child everything: love, security, a home that's solid and lasting. We're going to give them parents who chose each other," Alara said, "who built something real together, who survived and thrived despite everything trying to break them. That matters more than anything else." Over the following months, as Alara's pregnancy progressed, the ranch continued to flourish. They hired a housekeeper to help with daily tasks as Alara's mobility decreased. Jamie stepped up to handle more responsibilities. The rhythm of ranch life continued, seasonal and steady. In November, Harris's trial took place. Caleb and Alara both testified, presenting the evidence they'd gathered and recounting his confession. The jury took less than 2 hours to find him guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in territorial prison. "Justice," Caleb said as they left the courthouse. "Consequences," Alara corrected. "He made choices. Now he lives with them." December brought snow and the first real test of their expanded operation. They managed it well, the additional hands making the work manageable rather than overwhelming. Christmas was celebrated with their small ranch family: Jamie, the permanent hands, Mrs. Hadley, who'd become a close friend, Dalton, who'd proven himself invaluable. "Look at this," Caleb said to Alara as they surveyed their table full of people. "A year ago, it was just me. Now we have a family." "A chosen family," Alara said. "The best kind." Winter gave way to early spring, and Alara's due date approached. She was enormous, uncomfortable, and impatient. Her leg ached constantly from the extra weight, and she'd been forced to accept help with tasks that frustrated her to need assistance with. "I hate this," she said one morning as Caleb helped her out of bed. "I know. I feel useless." "You're growing a human being. That's the opposite of useless." "I can't work, can't help with the ranch, can barely walk." "You managed the entire cattle purchase from bed last week. You're still doing the books. You're not useless. You're just frustrated because you're used to doing everything yourself." She wanted to argue, but he was right. "I don't like needing help." "I know, but sometimes accepting help is its own kind of strength." The baby came on April 2nd, in the early hours of morning. The labor was long and difficult. Alara's hip had never fully recovered from old injuries, and it complicated things. But with the doctor there and Caleb holding her hand and talking her through each contraction, she pushed through. When the baby finally emerged, screaming and red and perfect, Alara burst into tears. "A girl," the doctor announced. "A healthy baby girl." Caleb was crying too, holding their daughter with shaking hands, looking at her like she was the most precious thing in existence. "She's perfect," he said. "Let me see her," Alara demanded, and he placed the baby in her arms carefully. She was perfect, tiny and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. Alara looked down at this new life they'd created and felt something shift fundamentally inside her. This was what she'd been searching for all those years. Not just love or acceptance or belonging, but this, the ability to create something lasting, to build a family, to give another human being the security and love she'd lost so young. What should we name her? Caleb asked. Elara had thought about this for months. Hope, because that's what she represents. Hope that we can build something better. Hope that we've broken the cycle of loss and loneliness. Hope that she'll grow up knowing she's wanted and valued and loved. Hope Mercer, Caleb said, testing it. It's perfect. They spent the next few days in an exhausted, joyful haze. Hope was a good baby. She ate well, slept in reasonable stretches, and had a lusty cry that suggested strong lungs and a determined personality. She's going to be stubborn, Elara predicted. With you and me as parents? Absolutely. Jamie came to visit, bringing flowers and looking terrified of the tiny baby. Mrs. Hadley came with practical gifts and experienced advice. Even Dalton stopped by with a silver rattle that had been his daughter's. This ranch has come alive again, he said, looking around at the bustling household. It's good to see. A week after Hope was born, when Elara was finally able to get out of bed for more than a few minutes, she walked out to the porch and looked at the ranch spread before her. The cattle grazing in the distance, the well-maintained buildings, the fences stretching across the land they now owned, all of it built through work and determination and refusal to give up. Caleb joined her, Hope sleeping in his arms. What are you thinking? He asked. That I almost missed this. If I'd given up after Whitmore rejected me, if I'd left Red Hollow, if I'd been too afraid to try again, I would have missed everything that matters. But you didn't give up. No, I didn't. She looked at him, at their daughter, at the life they'd built. I spent so long thinking my worth was diminished because of my limitations. But my limitations never defined my worth. They just defined how other people saw me. And once I found someone who saw past them, everything changed. It wasn't just finding someone, it was finding the right someone, and being brave enough to build something with them. Elara thought about the journey that had brought her here, the rejections, the struggle, the fear, the moments where giving up would have been easier than persisting. She thought about Caleb's parallel journey, about how loss had nearly destroyed him before he chose to keep living. She thought about how two broken people had found each other and built something whole. You know what the real lesson is? She said. What? That strength isn't about being perfect or unbreakable. It's about surviving the breaks and choosing to keep going anyway. It's about finding someone who sees your cracks and doesn't turn away. It's about building something real out of honest materials instead of pretending to be flawless. That's a good lesson. It's the only one that matters. Hope stirred in Caleb's arms, made a small sound of contentment, and settled back into sleep. Elara reached out, touched her daughter's tiny hand, felt small fingers curl reflexively around hers. She's going to grow up knowing she's enough, Elara said. Exactly as she is. No conditions, no qualifications, just enough. Because we're going to teach her that, by showing her every day that we're enough for each other, imperfections and all. Exactly. They stood together on the porch of the ranch they'd built, watching the sun rise over land they'd fought to keep, holding the child they'd created through love and choice and determination. The road had been hard, rejection, struggle, conflict, pain, but it had brought them here, to this moment, to this life. And standing there with her husband and daughter, looking out at everything they'd built together, Elara Quinn Mercer realized something profound. She'd been searching her whole life for a place to belong, never understanding that belonging wasn't about finding a place that accepted you. It was about building a place worth staying for, with someone who saw you clearly and chose you anyway. The frontier had been unforgiving. The town had been judgmental. The world had told her over and over that she wasn't enough. But they'd all been wrong. She'd always been enough. She'd just been waiting for circumstances that let her prove it. And now, finally, she had. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. Somewhere in the pasture, cattle lowed. In the barn, Jamie was starting the day's work. Inside the house, breakfast needed making, and laundry needed washing, and 1,000 small tasks awaited. But for this one perfect moment, Elara let herself just be. A wife, a mother, a partner, a survivor. A woman who'd been broken by life and put herself back together stronger. A woman who'd refused to accept less than she deserved, and in doing so, had found everything she'd ever needed. The story could have ended in rejection. It could have ended in bitterness or resignation or quiet desperation. Instead, it ended here, in love, in partnership, in a life built deliberately and defended fiercely, in the understanding that worth is inherent, not earned, and that the right person will always see it. And that, Alara thought as she leaned against her husband and watched their ranch wake to another day, was the only ending that mattered.